Call the meeting of City Council to order. Mrs. Hilliard is out of town, so we excuse her from the meeting this evening. And I remind everyone to turn off their cell phones or put them on mute. Mr. Cheatham has asked me to offer the invocation, and for the record, Mr. Martin, those rotate?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we bow in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the privilege of serving the city and the citizens therein. We're grateful for the responsibilities that we shoulder and pray for wisdom in our deliberation and the decisions that we make, that they might be fair and appropriate for all of our citizens as we seek to do Thy will, even above our own. Be our guest this night, we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 The Pledge of Allegiance, please join me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any amendments to the agenda?
Okay, appreciate it.
Are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to include discussion of the City of Franklin political campaign signs and guidelines.
Okay, and that would be under old and new business, item F.
That's fine with me.
Now, motion, is there any other amendments to the agenda? If not, may I have a motion to add that to our agenda?
Do I motion it, or that was my motion?
I'm sorry, you may make the motion.
I make a motion that we amend the agenda to include the discussion.
Is there a second? I'll second that. In favor of the motion, say aye.
Can we ask a question? What all do we need to know, besides what they mailed out to us? Is there something in there extra that we need to know about?
Somewhat, yes. That's what we wanted to discuss. I wanted to discuss.
Other than what she mailed out to us is the ordinance?
Yes.
I'll say aye.
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 Aye. And aye, motion carries. And item F for political sign discussion. Okay, the minutes of the previous meeting, are there any corrections or additions to the previous meeting of February the 27th? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Motions are second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. And now, with great apology, last meeting we got so involved in getting into the meeting, and we all had known Mr. Martin, but we failed to properly introduce our new city manager. We are proud to present and introduce Randy Martin as our new city manager. Been on board since the 21st. Comes from Morehead City, where he served a very long tenure there of 15 years. And we're excited about his coming to Franklin and being a part of the community. And Randy, please accept my apology. It was only in the matter of haste that night that we thought you were just already a part of the team.
That's the way I took it, and I thought I'd escaped the recognition. But
So
thank you,
we're
man.
glad to have you. Would you like to say anything?
Just glad to be here. It seems like I've been here a while, but I'm still learning.
Good.
But the people are wonderful, and I've been well received, and I again want to thank the City Council for the opportunity.
Good. Welcome to Franklin.
Mr. Mayor, can we give him the same thing we give all new employees? A
round of applause.
And one other comment, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that recognition. I hope I'm getting that a year from now. And the other thing I was going to mention is I assumed that the prayer was so good last time that it would just stay there until somebody else wanted to do it. But no, that was just an oversight. So thank you.
That's a problem. That's not a problem. We enjoy sharing that responsibility. And the protocol has been that we can either offer it ourselves or invite someone, either our own clergy person or a friend or someone in the community to offer the prayer so we can share that with the community. Next item on our agenda is citizens' time, and we have two persons who signed up to speak. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, council, Vice Mayor Johnson, to the council, to City Manager Martin, Attorney Taylor Williams. Good evening.
Great.
Good evening.
I have two items I would like to discuss very, very briefly. The first item is creating a committee to develop small business and jobs for the citizens of the city of Franklin, Virginia. I would like to request to be placed on the agenda to discuss and present the Linwood Johnson Economical Plan for development of jobs and creating economical growth for the city of Franklin, Virginia, to enhance and eliminate the 11% unemployment rate, shop here, buy here in Franklin, and I'll be willing to head that committee. The second item is to hold an election debate at here, City Hall, for the citizens of Franklin, Virginia. Many citizens are unable to get to the Workforce Center to see the debate. It would be a glorious event if we could see it on television. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Mrs. King?
Good evening,
Greetings.
Mayor Council, Vice Mayor Johnson, and to our new city manager, which comes from my home state, welcome.
Thank you.
I am Effie King from Pine Street. I'm not standing before you to complain, only to give a few accolades. First, I would like to say to our city council, you are appreciated. I know that you don't please everybody, but then that's not possible. I'd like to thank Vice Mayor Racine Johnson, Ward 4, and Councilwoman Mary Hilliard, Ward 5, and past Councilwoman Rosa Lawrence, Ward 3, for the forum you had when you had department heads to share with your wards their functions in the city of Franklin. Your forum was very informative. I would like to suggest that other wards might do this if you haven't. I learned a lot that I didn't know. Last but definitely not least, some members of Ward 4, including myself, are very pleased with Chief Hodgson and the police department. I have been in Franklin for 49 years. I feel that the police department has improved in many ways. I have not seen the police department more visible than I do now on the south side of Franklin. They are there when they are needed in a timely manner. When they come, they are very respectful. They address you in a positive way, and that they are there to protect and serve. They show this by their demeanor. I say thank you, Chief Hodgson. A leader by role modeling. A leader leads by role modeling and example. In conclusion, I would like to remind the City Council that you are being televised, which is nice, and I hope that each of you will remember to disagree without being disagreeable. We look to you to be responsible, accountable, and discipline. Words are very important. Our world was created by words. Remember, each of you represent your ward or your constituents. But the city of Franklin, but you represent the city of Franklin. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is a proclamation V-A-C-C-I-N-E. And I would like to invite this young lady to come forward to talk about it, and we're going to present a proclamation to her. Good evening.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome.
So would you just like a quick, I guess, overview of my project?
Yes, please tell everyone who you are.
My name is Katie Connor, and I live at 148 Crescent Drive here in Franklin, Virginia.
Okay. And what's your project?
It's called Project Vaccine, and vaccine stands for Virginians Curing Children Through Immunizations with New Efforts.
Okay.
Basically, I read an article in Scientific American, and it was talking about here in America, measles, mumps, pertussis, polio, all these diseases that we thought had been eliminated are coming back. And I was like, America, where we have healthcare, we have immunizations at our fingertips, we have all of this medical equipment that not many other countries have. So basically, I founded the Individual Community Problem Solving Project, and my goal is to teach children and teens rather than parents. I've given presentations at the middle and high schools. I am going to give presentations at the elementary school. I've created a brochure to give out to kids. I have a PSA that's getting ready to go out on the TV here in Franklin. I'm really excited about that. I have weekly facts that are featured in the newspaper. I've got a Your Turn article that's hopefully coming up soon. So basically, I'm just trying to reach teens and children on their level and teach them why it's important for them to get these vaccines. And so far, it's actually been really, really successful, and I'm really happy and surprised at how many teens have actually come up and said, I didn't realize it was important. So it's been great.
Well, good. And it's your Problem Solvers project?
Yes.
And what grade are you in?
I am a senior at Franklin High School.
Congratulations. We have a proclamation, and I hope you all have seen that in your packet. And before we present that, may I have a motion to adopt or approve this proclamation?
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Question?
Well, I'm sorry?
I just wanted to know, is this a single effort, individual effort
Yes,
on your part? It's not a committee?
No, this is all me.
Okay, all right. So,
Okay, I have a motion to second. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
aye.
And aye. Motion carries. While it's a long one, I'll sit here to read it, and then I'd like to come present it to you. It's entitled Health Through Vaccines for All, Proclamation. Whereas Project Vaccine was founded in 2011 by Katie Connor as an individual community problem-solving project, and whereas the purpose of the project is to create and maintain a media campaign to raise awareness of the importance of the vaccines for children and teens, and whereas numerous efforts have been made to promote awareness of the importance of vaccines, including presentations at J.P. King Middle School, Franklin High School, and S.P. Morton Elementary School, the creation of a Facebook page and a Twitter account to spread the word to parents and children, the creation of a coloring page for children, and a brochure handout to be placed throughout the schools, and whereas due to the poverty levels in the western Tidewater region, including Franklin, vaccines are not as readily accessible to children as they should be, leaving numerous children unprotected from vaccine-preventable diseases. And whereas vaccines are among the world's most successful and cost-effective public health tools available for preventing disease and death, and whereas children need a series of vaccines starting at birth to be fully protected against 14 potentially serious diseases, whereas immunization is the best way parents can protect their children against a variety of serious diseases. Now therefore, the Franklin City Council does hereby proclaim March the 15th, 2012 as Health Through Vaccines for All Day in the city of Franklin, Virginia, and encourage businesses, government agencies, national organizations, community-based organizations, and service groups to spread the message throughout their communities about the benefits of immunization. And further, the City Council does also encourage public and private health care professionals, parents and children, caregivers in the city of Franklin, to protect the health of the children by ensuring early and on-time immunizations against vaccine-preventable childhood diseases, dated this 12th day of March, 2012, signed Mayor James P. Council III. Congratulations, Katie.
Thank you,
Great
sir.
progress. I'll present this to you, although we're going to give you a framed copy
Thank you so much.
on very nice paper. Gotta be sure Mom's got it. Congratulations. Great work. Okay, next item is the Southampton Franklin Transit Development Plan and presentation. Is that going to be given by Mr. Skirvin? And Donald?
Yes, sir, Mayor and City Council. What we have on the agenda tonight is a presentation on a plan that has been in the process for the past approximately 8 months. It's been a task force and a team put together. The Southampton County applied for a grant in support of the Senior Services IRIDE to study the IRIDE and to look at what opportunities may be out there and how the IRIDE was doing. The Department of Rail is where the funds came from. There's some opportunities down the road in the future for future grants, if warranted. But this is a plan, basically, that is required, you know, as we did our bike and ped plan, to have opportunities for grant funding, as we did our gateway enhancement plan to have opportunities. This too will be a plan for future reference, and hopefully we will get that into our comprehensive plan as a reference in our comp plan as we do our update. So with that, I'd like to introduce John Skirvin. He's the CEO of Senior Services of Southeastern Virginia. So, John?
Mr. Mayor,
Welcome.
councilmen and women, and Mr. Martin, it's very good to meet you for the first time.
Thank you.
My name is John Skirvin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Senior Services of Southeastern Virginia. We are your area agency on aging, and we serve all of Southampton roads. We have been here in Franklin for 40 years, and over the last several years, we understood that transportation was a need and basically decided to start a loop route, actually following one of the hurricanes, because people were having trouble getting from South Side over to where the help was at the Armory. So we started a loop. It worked kind of, and we went back and revised it and revamped it. And what we have today is the next generation of a plan that I'd like to present to you. This evening, my purpose here this evening is to inform you about the need for public transit, to present an overview of the plan, and to request that Council adopt the 2011 Southampton and Franklin Transportation Development Plan as recommended by the Franklin Planning Commission resolution. Briefly about us, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, Senior Services of Southeastern Virginia. Our official name is Southeastern Virginia Area-Wide Model Program Incorporated. We are formerly known as CVAMP. That was our acronym. We were established in 1972, and today we have about 113 people working. And I asked HR to look and see what we look like here in Franklin and Southampton, and clearly we, I think, are a small employer of reasonable size. And the value of the services that we deliver is over $700,000. This morning, because we just got our February numbers in at the end of last week for IRIDE, what I did was go back and look at year over year. In our view at Senior Services, demand is actually, are people really using it? Is it good value? And what we see is from the study over the past 3 years, we've averaged about 5,100 rides per year on iRide here in Franklin. It's actually 5,161 for FY11. But when I look at the first 5 months of this fiscal year, which would start October, we're October to September fiscal year, I see a remarkable growth. At this time last year, we had provided 1,850 rides. As of the end of February, and granted it's a leap year, so there's a couple extra transit days, we've provided almost 2,400 rides. The CFO said, well, wait a second, make sure that you don't overinflate that because you may have extra transit days in FY12. Indeed, there are 7 extra transit days over FY11. That would only account for 168 of the rides. So, in truth, this looks like a 30% increase in ridership 1 year to the next. In fact, without the extra days, it's a 20% increase in ridership. And just this morning, there was a national study released that across the United States, people are using transit a whole lot more. That's the first sort of, okay, so the proof's in the pudding. But then when we look at the studies that have been done about Franklin and Southampton, we see that there are 216 non-drivers in Franklin and 1,300 in Southampton County. And that a large number of people carpool, and these are largely for employment. There have been other studies, and there is a rural long-range transit plan that was developed by the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, and it notes that the recent edition of iRide, this was done, I want to say in 2009, I'm pleased that it's really put a dent into the human service transit needs. But what they found in the coordinated transportation plan, was that long list of needs. And what we found in the study that was done last year that was finished in December, that Donald has referenced, that has created this TDP, Transit Development Plan, it really confirmed those issues that were found by the HRPDC. People want service on Saturdays. They want service beyond 5 o'clock. They want it to cover more service areas. They want it to run more quickly. And so in order to get to those conclusions, the work that was done involved through consultants that were paid for by the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit. They looked at population, employment, land use, on-board and senior center surveys. In other words, we talked to the riders, and then we actually talked to the drivers, because they would be the ones that might really know. And then they also looked at other localities in Virginia as peer systems to compare this area to those peer systems. And so I'll sort of get now to the recommendations, or to the heart of the story, which is that they found that we can, without adding extra cost, improve our services by streamlining the routes that we had developed. So we are in process of redesigning those routes, and that should reduce the length of, to get on at one point and ride the whole loop, it takes you 1 hour and 10 minutes. With the changes that we're making in the routes, we can get that down to 50 minutes. And so that was one of the complaints right that we're trying to address. We stop at multiple places within the same apartment complexes and shopping destinations, so we're consolidating those, and they call them incursions. Now, if you call us and you have a wheelchair ride that you need, or you've got an armful, we'll deviate. We'll pick you up because we're about providing the service. And this is just an illustration of how we will be streamlining the routes. Right now there are 18 different stops on the route, so we can whittle that down, and it'll take us less time at each stop. And you do, I hope, have these slides in front of you. That we intend to put in place as of April 1st. The other thing that they found, that the consultants recommended strongly, was that we sometimes have been running empty vans back and forth from Cortland into the shared economic district here. Our main stop is the Walmart, by the way. What they recommended was that we go to an on-demand shuttle. so that we would run from Cortland 2 days a week. Up until 10 a.m. on that day, you can call, and then we'll send the van and pick you up, as opposed to just sending the van empty there and hoping you're going to get on. And then with the savings that that creates, we will be able to go to other localities in Southampton County and do the same sort of on-demand shuttle. So those are some simple things that we can do. What the consultants also found is that we could dramatically increase ridership over what we see now if we increased our service to accommodate people going to and from work. And so you then, and that increased the frequency of the service to be every hour on the hour is part of that, getting that what they call headway down. The consultants also recommended that we create a transit coordinator position, and I just this morning saw that HRT is doing an education program to teach seniors how to ride the bus once they get off the light rail. That's the kind of education program that might be offered. We are looking at our current staffing patterns to see if there's a way to incorporate some of that effort into what we already do. I'm not in favor of spending more money if I don't have to. Here's my board of directors. The long-range recommendations would be to, and it's pretty logical, if it takes you an hour to get around a loop, if you put another bus on, it's only going to take you a half hour. So if we get 2 buses running, that would dramatically reduce the headway time, and potentially, we'd have to study it, increase the ridership. And then the intra and inter-county shuttle. One of the things that the Planning Commission in Southampton has talked to us about is getting from Cortland to Boykins, which is working on a revival or an upgrading of that community. So why do people only come to Franklin? Why can't we go within the county? So we're looking at how we might get that done as well. And then in the long run, other kinds of capital improvements such as bus shelters, in-bus security technology, that would be cameras, and communication systems. We have, I'm pleased to report, received a grant to use GPS and new routing software through, it's a federal grant that we've come up with a local match for, and so we'll be able to have GPS units on multiple vehicles, so we'll be able to track them at any one time. So we know that they're not going to go to the Hardys when they're not supposed to. And then the question always comes down to, how much does it cost? The way that you calculate costs for public transit is by the cost that it takes you, about how much it costs you to drive the vehicle for 1 hour. That's called an operating hour or a revenue hour. Our revenue hour costs $45.37. And the way that, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But if you think about it, take what you earn, any one of us in this room, in a year's time, and divide it by 2008. That's a 40-hour work week. And you're going to come up with how much per hour you get paid. Then multiply that number by about 25%, and that's what's going to cost for the benefits. You got a full benefit package, okay? Then think about your driving your car for that hour. So in effect, you're paying yourself a salary to drive that car. Then you have to. Then what we look at is all of the training, the drug testing, the criminal background checks, and on top of that, we are. My wife would probably charge me for supervision, but we have supervisors, and so all of those costs go into that labor cost, along with the things that you normally think about, which are tires and fuel and repairs, insurance, and your overhead, and then think about what your car payment might be and add it to that operational, and you come up with your capital costs, and that's how we arrive at that number, because a big body-on-chassis wheelchair van is somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000. So where does this money come from? I mean, if we're doing this now, and then how is it that we're doing it? Right now, if you'll notice, we have all of these different sources of funding that are used together to make the money, to put together the money to run the IRIDE routes. And I will say at the bottom, you see Farebox, and we charge $1 a ride, and people are very faithful. It's really a very good thing. With the Transportation Development Plan, what we are not now able to do, but what the plan recommends, is that we become, or that Franklin and Southampton become rural public transit providers. I turned it yellow because that means that every one of those white sources of funding, every dollar that Senior Services, for instance, puts into it from federal funds, can now get matched by 65 cents of federal and state dollars. Put it simply, for every 35 cents that we put into this locally, the federal and state government will match it with 65 cents. And that's how you get to those longer range goals of increasing the amount of service that you can provide. Which means that every dollar that, I won't belabor it, but right now we are supported by the City of Franklin, the Southampton County, by Camp Family Foundations, by Franklin Southampton Charities, by the United Way. We carry people from here up to the Free Health Clinic in Suffolk, and also up to the Federally Qualified Health Clinic in Ivor. So the way we're able to carry people who are not senior citizens is because we have these other sources of funds. So the steps that would need to be taken to adopt or to establish this public transit is to adopt the resolution. We will implement the short-term recommendations. Southampton's Planning Commission on last week took the action to accept the transportation, develop the TDP, and to include it in their comprehensive plan. They did not adopt the plan, they accepted the plan. I want to make that very clear, because what they're saying is we want to see what the citizens say. And they're concerned about the cost, which is rightly so we all should be. So that's where Southampton is. And I was very pleased for that. They were very deliberate and intentional in their considerations. Should Franklin and Southampton, or either Franklin or Southampton, decide that they want to do public transportation within this plan, then one or both of the entities would establish a transportation management authority, which would then further and cost models and develop the local matching sources. Then they would apply, the Transportation Management Authority would apply to the Department of Rail and Public Transit for the state and federal funds, and it wouldn't necessarily be Senior Services, IRIDE, that would be the selected vendor of the service. As Suffolk did, you would put it out for bid, and then you would have competition to get the greatest level of service in the most cost-effective manner. And then the final question that I get asked is, okay, so how much is it going to cost us now? Right now, the City of Franklin provides Senior Services with $4,411 in local funding as match to our federal funds. That $716,000 I mentioned earlier is actual real dollar value that we bring in, and it's actually got roughly a 15 to 20% match requirement. We develop that match from many different sources, including the $4,411. What I would like to request of this year, as we're working this IRIDE thing to develop it further, is to increase that match to a total of $6,350, and that is exactly the amount that we asked of Southampton County. And the numbers in Southampton County have risen, the ridership numbers, whereas ours went from 1,850 to 2,400, theirs went from 530 to 875. So it's clear, I mean, because there's fewer people coming in and using it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, would conclude my presentation, and I thank you for your time this evening. And if there's any questions, I can try and answer.
I have one. What would it take, and this just came recently, I don't recall whether it was at the seniors, the social services meeting I was at or some other meeting, but there are a few people out in Hunterdale, which is our southmost point, Franklin, that IRIDE doesn't go to Hunterdale. How much difficulty and what kind of time would it take before you could implement IRIDE going to service the people of Hunterdale?
Thank you for asking that. We did try to service Hunter, and we didn't get ridership. And if what I'm hearing is that demand may have resurfaced there. So what I will ask this is exactly how we work IRIDE. I'll be happy to talk with my staff and ask them to relook at Hunterdale, and then we would have to see how it would sequence in to the routing of it, and what would it take in terms of dollars and cents is going to depend on how many hours it takes over a week's time it takes to actually provide that service, and then we can get a cost estimate and figure out where to get the money.
You mentioned that you had worked something out, perhaps, or looking forward to having something with Cortland, where instead of running the vehicle out there on a regular, you'd only go out there if you got a call, that you would put it on the route.
The idea is that you would have set days when you go to different communities where you would then have that demand, that on-demand shuttle. So, for instance, Cortland might have Tuesdays and Thursdays. Boykins might have Mondays and Wednesdays. Sedley might have Friday. I mean, part of what we do is talk to people and ask them, are there riders there? Would you use it if it was here? I mean, we're really careful about the planning of that. So that's how you would do where you have more remote communities. Where we have a centralized urban area like we have here in the city, I'm just tickled that people are using it so much. And at the public hearings we had over at Southampton before the Planning Commission, several families here from Franklin went over and testified. There's a lady who takes her kid to the Children's Center on the bus, and we don't charge the kid $1. There's a lady who uses it to go to work every day. And she knows if she's late at the one stop, she can hustle and get to the next stop. It was really remarkable to hear people talk about it. Sorry, I got off track and I lost your question.
So basically, I would like to be able to, if find out where it came from, the question that I got, how I can respond to the citizen that perhaps you are looking at adding Hunterdale again, and they are on the radar that you're contemplating trying to work Hunterdale back in.
Yeah, and yes. And the question that we would ask is this person going to be a regular rider, or are these folks going to regularly use it, say, to get to work, or to get, in this case, to get the kid to the child care center?
Well, this is a lady, I think she has health care problems and needs to get to dialysis or something like that.
If I can interject, because I talked to the lady that probably told you about it, which was Pat Ballard. And we brought this up at the workforce, at the work stations that we had with, drawing a blank on her name now. Lady heads up IRIDE. And she said she would look into that.
Okay.
And I think at this point in time there was one, but what Pat was concerned about is that community on Country Club Road is becoming more aged and probably less drivers. And therefore they may be primed for people needing a ride to things like the wife physical therapy at the hospital and that sort of thing.
We also have demand response transportation. We stage 5, 6 vehicles, more than that now, 8 vehicles here. And thank you very much for letting us park in your parking lot. It's a lot safer. We had serious vandalism, Mr. Manager, on our vehicles last year, and the city has allowed us to park them, in your lot, and we haven't just no problems. So with the demand response for something like dialysis, we can give people provide up to 4 trips a month. If there are individual doctors rides to doctors' offices, we can, that's in addition to the iRide. So absolutely, we can.
So we just
Look
need to
at that.
basically let her know that we do have transportation available for her.
Absolutely. She should call, Susan Story is the supervisor for Western Tidewater, and I'm just blanking on the social worker's name who's over at 4th and Main. I apologize. But yes, call us and we'll organize something.
The fellow named Kim is in charge of the transportation.
Kim Slaughter, that's right.
Right.
And I don't know that number off the top of my head, I apologize, but the main number is 461-9481. And if they would call there, we'll make sure that they can help.
Thank you.
And I know Kim is very interjected to do these kinds of things. He tried to start transportation and a route out to Southampton Garden, out to Mobile Park out there, because there was a lot of need. And it ended up, and that's why they do it on calls, because they ended up for a year having 8 riders with the thing going out on a regular route. So that certainly, they had to stop it because
Wasn't
of that.
economical.
Right.
So John, you basically have to research the demand before you extend a route, other than perhaps an individual needs it regularly, where you can give an on-demand or schedule that person.
That's correct.
So you can give individual care if needed.
Yes.
Until you can develop a demand to put it on a route.
That is correct. And then we have the wheelchair vehicles that we can also task separately in this.
So we could easily suggest that over time, we could identify other areas that have developed a higher demand and just bring that to the group, and then that could be researched to see if that needs to be.
We would welcome that, and that's why this transportation development plan is such a good thing, because, I can't say, oh yeah, and then we'll go pick them up, because, we've got a finite amount of dollars. But if we were to travel the path of creating a transportation, public transit service, and we're able to draw down these other dollars, that would give you us the ability to expand the service. And we've researched this from several different angles, and we are able to use our Older Americans Act dollars to match. It's considered local match, even though it's other federal funds. The Virginia Department of Rail and Public that, and that's gold, because that's our primary funding source for these services.
Without the authority, we don't get the match.
Accurate.
So with the authority, we would expose ourselves to a matching program.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're, at Senior Services, we would be happy to put you in touch with the people at the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit who would be responsible for doing that.
Now, I'm unaware, maybe you can tell me, since we are already contributing to the program, and I realize that you're working with a finite budget, but are you maximizing your marketing ability through such as having it on our PEG channel, broadcasting it on our PEG channel, and trying to basically let people know that this service is available?
Thank you. No, we're not on the city channel. That would be great. We don't buy paid advertising. The other thing that we found in the study, or that the consultants found, was that people think it's for senior citizens because they see senior services. They don't know that it's for them. The Franklin, Southampton, the charities, the United Way, those are the dollars that allow us, that keeps the state. The state challenged us and said, you're not allowed to carry non-elderly because old people's money is funding the vans. And I said, but the seats are empty. They're paid for. They said, we can't help that. You're not allowed to carry non-seniors unless you can generate the revenues to pay for those rides. So that's where using city money, county money, United Way, where we've been able to do that. And even though I think that policy is cack-handed, it's a silly policy because an empty seat is a wasted seat.
Would you violate your 501c status?
No, sir.
If you were to minimize the size of senior services on the bus, because that's pretty big, and that stands out, and it kind of makes you think that's for seniors.
Right.
If you were to minimize that portion and maybe, make I-Ride bigger or something, or have Franklin Southampton Transit, something else so that it would overcome that stigma so that more people would ride?
We would not jeopardize our 501c3 status in terms of the way that we advertise on the buses, so to speak.
So that could possibly help you with your marketing campaign.
Absolutely. And those are really good suggestions. And I will, and we have a really good working relationship with the city. And I'll work with, I guess, Mr. Goodwin at this point to, figure out who the right person is to talk to about the city television channel, and that sort of thing. And then, you've got a little I-Ride sign right out there here by City Hall. Signage actually is pretty expensive, and the kind that we use now are, forgive me, they're like the
campaign signs.
Yeah, they're like, I didn't want to get into that.
They're expensive.
They are, but anyhow. So that is one of our goals, is to have better and more permanent signage, but then you get into issues with zoning, and there are restrictions and that sort of thing, which would necessarily be, in the city's purview.
Are these the kinds of things that the authority would address and package together and seek approval of?
Yes, sir.
Well, there was even discussions about mini shelters instead of just a sign, about making it look a lot more professional, a lot more permanent in its structure.
Yeah. And with this 5311, I'm sorry, this is 53. It's Federal Transit Administration Section 5311, Rural Public Transportation Funds. There are capital funds available also. I know for rolling stock, it's a 10% local match. I don't know about buildings, but I do know that there are some of our colleagues, other area agencies, that do public transportation, where they've built car barns and quite substantial structures. So there's a real, I think it's really opportunity for the city and the county and senior services to really work together to improve that whole transportation network. And with the paper plant reopening, and with the wood pellet plant being developed, and with the other thing is that's coming that I have my eye on is the high speed to Richmond. That's going to open up a whole lot of opportunities, but it means getting people from here to there. And then you've got the medical care. So there's, first things first, and you start with what you can really do. So we've got to make what we do more efficient.
How many vehicles do we have involved right now today?
Approximately 8 vehicles.
And you're talking about an increase of what?
Well, when I say, right now I-Ride has one dedicated body-on-chassis vehicle and one backup. And then we carry people into the Dr. Martin Luther King Center. We use 4 vehicles for that, and we use 2 other on-demand vehicles to do the individual rides.
Okay. You said something about you got to get the ridership. Let's say you go to Hunterdale, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to try to get a certain number of people committed to ride the bus. All right. Say you just have one. Will you go all the way out to Hunterdale to pick them up?
That's a good question. That's why we stopped doing it, because we only had, hardly even one. That's why we're going to this different model for quarter.
Because we've got a lot of if here, you got to get the people to make it affordable.
That's part of the, we've grown up not using public transportation in this part of the world. I personally grew up in Philadelphia. I took the bus to school. I took the train to work. I took the L. You didn't drive into town if you didn't have to. But it's just a different environment the way we've come up. But what I'm seeing now is, with this increase in ridership, is that people are starting to catch on to it. So if people in Hunterdale began to think about, well, I could catch I-Ride, okay, then, and if there was a connection here to get up to Suffolk, and I know that we want to keep tax dollars in Franklin and Southampton. I understand that. Buy here, shop here. Shop here, buy here. But there's also the issue of bringing other people into Franklin and those kinds of things, and just a choice that people want to have.
And you get paid weekly by the hours that they put in on the vehicles? Did I hear that right?
That's how good question. That's how we calculate the cost, but we have a regular payroll. The various sources of funds come to us in, for instance, the city makes a lump sum payment once a year, so does the county. Camp Family Foundation's, it's a grant, so that comes in as a lump sum, and then we do reports on a regular basis. Same thing with the Franklin Southampton Charities and the United Way. The state, the Older Americans Act dollars come in on a monthly basis to reimburse us for what we've spent. So, it's a pretty complex mix of sources that you have to keep straight.
Okay, I have one more question. All right, right now we're paying $4,411, right?
Yes, sir.
And if we went with this, it would cost the city $6,350.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's say we have a shortfall, and we don't have the riders, can you come back and charge the city more money?
No,
We have
sir.
a shortfall?
Great question. Right now, we're making a request. I stand here, just making a request for $6,350, which is the same we're requesting in Southampton County. When we get into, if and when we get into real public transportation, then we would be forecasting ridership, and you would be doing adjustments. If, let's say, Hunterdale just didn't work out and you wanted to discontinue that service, then if you just said, we're going to save that money and not use it, or we're going to redirect it where there is additional demand, you could make those choices. And that's kind of the best answer I can give you at this point.
How much money annually, right now, approximately, do y'all take in?
In terms of fares?
Yeah, everything, the profits, like, not profits, but how much you take in? Is that a fair question?
I knew you'd ask, and I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'll be happy to get you those numbers, though, because we do track this. Transportation is expensive.
Right.
So it certainly exceeds, for all of the iRide, it certainly exceeds $100,000.
Right.
Would it be safe to say that you take in enough to cover your expenses?
Absolutely. We're not making a profit, goodness knows.
Not so much that you're making a profit, but are you covering your expenses?
Yes, we are.
All right, and what are the number of rider days? Is it 365?
No, sir, it's Monday through Friday. The average, it typically averages about 20 or 21 rider days per month.
Okay.
Average riders per day in FY12 is 24. In FY11 was 21. Just because I just happened to do the arithmetic this morning.
So you have like 45 people a day?
No, that's rides. I'm sorry, rides.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm glad Councilman Bly answered that, because I was so excited about being able to provide the service to the citizens that I was negligent in asking. Are you asking for approval of this tonight?
No, sir.
Okay.
And that's where Mr. Goodwin comes in with the planning process.
Okay.
Mine was for information only this
Fine.
evening.
So what I would like to see personally is a structure of even though it's a 501c, we have many nonprofit organizations where their CEOs are being paid considerably. I'd like to see a breakdown of how the payroll is in accordance with the revenues that come in.
Sure.
And things of that nature.
Great.
So
If it would help, I can provide you with an audit of the organization and be happy to share with you blinded salary information.
Roughly, what are the drivers paid approximately?
They start at $8.50 an hour unless they've got a CDL, and then they start at 11. The average wage of a driver here in Franklin is somewhere in the neighborhood, I want to say, of $9.25 or 35 cents. Our drivers, if they're full-time, have complete benefits, and that's the equivalent of a 30% benefit package. And I believe the iRide drivers are full-time.
Now, you said here in Franklin.
Well, and same anywhere. I mean, at
So how
seniors-
many places do you have IRIDE?
Good question. Franklin, Southampton, Isle of Wight, and Smithfield area, and then we have a grant-funded program in Norfolk that runs up in the Ward's Corner area. And it's not near as robust as this one.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a regional organization. We cover all the 8 jurisdictions of Southampton roads. And our drivers are all on that level, start at 850 or 11 if you're CDL, and then
This might be a little more difficult, and I can accept that. I'm not sure
Okay.
as an answer. But how many of your drivers are employees from Franklin to know that we're employing Franklin people?
Okay. I know that 16 of my employees are from Franklin and Southampton County, and I don't know right off the
16.
top of my head.
That's a good idea.
And our
Gives me a good-
payroll, by the way, is over $333,000.
333,000 for payroll?
Yeah, that was up there.
Okay.
There you go. 333,766 is our Franklin Southampton payroll.
Just Franklin, Southampton payroll?
Yes, sir, and that doesn't include benefits.
For 16
For
drivers?
16 employees.
16 employees,
Right.
300,000?
$333,766.
But that includes part-time, full-time, and that's the whole gambit.
Yeah, you can't tickle out an individual wage for that. I'll be happy to send you our wage. As part of our responsibility, we publish all of our positions and all of the pay ranges for those positions. I'll be happy to get you that, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you.
We addressed it, but I'm not sure I got an answer, and you may have to get back to us. The total cost to perform IRIDE for Franklin, you're going to get that to us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I really just don't have it off the top of my head.
You said you were not asking for a commitment tonight.
Correct.
So I'm good on that. As this thing grows, you've got in your presentation, right now we're at 4,400 going to 6,300. In 2013, you're looking for a local funding of 43,000. That's in your presentation. What makes up that number?
Those would be the 43,000. In that scenario, what we would be doing, thank you, Don. Okay. Local funding required 43,000. That's where we could turn the Older Americans Act dollars we're using now would be part of that 43,000. The foundation dollars that we're using, all the dollars we're using now could be part of that local match.
And what do you see future costs to the city being?
That's the bottom line question. It can only be answered with the amount of service that the city wants to see provided. And then we work at the cost of that, and then we figure out where the money's going to come from. I can say this, that it will not explode, because if you do public transportation, you will have control of it. And that's why Suffolk got out of HRT, frankly. They just weren't happy with the value that they were getting for their administrative contribution. And frankly, we bid on that in partnership with Virginia Regional Transit, and we're doing the ADA Transit for VRT is another nonprofit that's coming in and doing the public transportation there, and apparently are doing well. We are doing the ADA transportation, and we're averaging about 24 rides a week on 2 routes, which is about as much as HRT did on 4 routes for people with disabilities. So it really, Suffolk said, we're not going to do 4 routes, we're going to do 2 routes. That's all the money we've got. And that's an example of an answer to your question.
So we control that by the level of service we choose to provide.
That is accurate.
Which is dependent upon ridership and need, and whether or not we can afford to address those needs, or to what extent we can.
Right.
Okay.
And if I could interject, it would be on an annual budget cycle, or do you ask for a multi-year commitment when you do that?
We have been asking for one single-year budget requests.
That's what I understood.
The transit development, the TDP, is actually a 6-year plan. So within this window of the next 6 years, you can do nothing, or you can take it, through the steps and build it as you want to. It really is it's a municipal decision. Is the best way I can put it.
25 riders per day. That's a lot of money that we're spending to move a few people.
You're right.
Percentage of population, maybe 1%? To spend the level of money that we are talking about spending, you almost could, if we could get the money, which they probably wouldn't give it to us, but you almost could just tell them to go get a cab and we'd reimburse them and come out a third of the cost. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know what the total cost is because we haven't gotten it, but I'm just looking at the payroll.
No, that payroll isn't all transit.
Okay.
That's not all transit by a long shot. It's social workers, it's cooks, it's...
for the whole senior services, our program in Franklin.
Our total, we have 16 employees who reside in Franklin and Southampton, and that's the pay, that's what they earn. That's not, they may not necessarily, for instance, our transit supervisor, Curtis Cole, is a Franklin resident and works in our Norfolk office every day. His salary is included in that. So it's not all going to be people who work in Franklin, but they bring their money home if they get their money here.
So your number was just trying to show the economic impact of Franklin.
That's correct.
Right.
But what Benny's asking for is the cost of operations of the transit piece.
And you're going to get that, and that's fine. But it just seems, in kind of piecing it all together, you said it was very expensive, and I just want to point out, for 25 people, that is a lot of money.
But doesn't 25 people put you in the red every day? Do you actually make a profit, you think?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
No, it doesn't.
So you're actually in the red every day.
You bet.
Until you build it up.
Yes, exactly. And even then, the fares will never pay for the cost of public transportation.
Yeah, I'd say it's a fair statement. There's no transit in this country that is in the black.
That's correct.
If they didn't receive the federal dollars to subsidize it.
That's what keeps them afloat.
That's one way to look at it. That is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that's what allows a municipality to provide services to its citizens so they can get to where they need to go and get to work and get home and participate in civic life. Yeah. And that is fundamentally the policy question I think that elected officials need to address in terms of accessibility, because it's what makes a community a livable community. And I don't mean to get on a soapbox here, but yeah, it's really a balance between, it's expensive.
The cost.
These folks that use it in large measure don't drive. They don't have a lot of money. It's the difference between getting to where they need to go and being isolated. And isolation breeds all sorts of problems.
Are there any other specific questions we want John to bring back to us?
I'm sorry.
I don't have specific questions. I just have a couple more. Do you have an idea of what the ultimate goal is?
In those long-range projections for the city of Franklin, I'd like to see Franklin have the sort of public transit system that has 2 vans full-time running up to and including Saturdays from 6A to 7P to get people to and from work, along with the supplemented ADA service to get people who live on 3/4 of a mile either side who are medically eligible. And then I'd like to see, and part of what we're working on with the grant from the Ovacy Healthcare Foundation, is the human service organizations, the churches, the CSBs, all of the other vans that you see sitting there in church parking lots Monday through Saturday, involved in this, so that we can have a one-click, one-call center, so it doesn't matter where you live, you can get a ride. And the public transit becomes the skeleton, and the human service side becomes the flesh. And that's the vision of it. And I'm sorry if it's a little grandiose, but...
But one thing that came out of that with using the church vans and stuff was the potential of liability, which I think was pretty much said there would be a strong potential for liability if that were the case, if we started doing that.
And there's something called the Community Transportation Association of Virginia, which has an insurance pool, and we happen to be a member of it, and it's several hundred transit providers around Virginia, and then we use that to drive bargains with the insurance companies. So yeah, I mean, there's liability that's got to be attended to. There's no hiding. I mean, all of this stuff is above board.
Yeah, because that was the idea that was being floated, especially out in the county and very far reaches of the county as being a solution.
Yeah, and then the volunteer transportation is another big component of this, and we actually, AARP sent a letter out to 10,000 people, seniors, asking if they would contact us if they wanted to deliver meals or either carry people to the doctor. Frankly, we only got 25 responses. So, but again, I think it's better if you work through your organized churches and other organizations.
What I would like to see included specifically in that report is, I guess, almost like an audit, because my concern, because you're asking for an increase, first, the more we increase, is the more the federal government will increase their match?
At this point, at this time, no, because Franklin is not a public transportation provider. If it were, the answer would be yes. Make sense?
Are there any entities that will increase their portion as a result of our increase?
At this time, no.
Okay. And finally, when you're asking for an increase, I have to be fiscally conservative in regards to you need more money, but people are getting raises. My concern are providing the service to the citizen. And as Mr. Burgess brought out, what is going to be most economical for us to be able to provide that service for our citizens? I am also in support of providing services to the counties, and I understand collectively we can make it work better. But I would like to see those figures because I'm concerned with, though it's a nonprofit organization, some I'm sure are profiting. It's their living, so they're profiting from it. So I'd like to get that kind of information broke down.
Be happy to do that.
One final just comment, it's not really a question, and that is that I know we're looking down the road at having to put in an authority, but and that's down the road. But our experience has not been very positive with authorities with what we've got going, and it seems like we lose control at our level in budgeting and other things when we go to an authority, that all of a sudden we get blindsided at budget time with additional, because it was not necessarily mismanagement, but just we didn't see it coming, and all of a sudden they just say, well, here, you owe us $50,000, where last year it was $20,000 or whatever.
Right.
We need to make sure that when if we decide we're going to go into this, that we deal with that a little bit better than what some of the other authorities are.
Absolutely, and we operate the same way at Senior Services. We don't go into stuff blindly, and so that's exactly right.
We don't have to set up true-up systems like we have every place else. We can run it like a business, and that's what you're saying, I think.
We just can't afford a tad.
Yeah, right.
And Donald, what's the next step from the Planning Commission?
Well, tonight, I didn't really realize it was going to be a request for funds, but I'm sure at budget time there will be that request. But tonight was just to get you, up to speed on the plan. Again, it's just a plan. Our next step is I would like to draft a resolution. The Planning Commission has adopted a resolution and to request that City Council adopt a resolution to include the plan, to accept the plan, or adopt the plan. So I would draft a resolution for your next meeting, for your consideration. It would be a non-financial binding document that would not lock you into any funding, just the adoption, approval of the plan itself.
As a part of the
As-
overall city
Yeah,
comprehensive.
as a plan, and in the plan, and even in the plan itself, it says you can stay where you are, or you can move forward to the next step. And if you need in the meanwhile, we are doing assessments. Senior Services is going to compile data and keep that data coming, so we can see if it's going to be something that's going to get bigger, and whether we need to move to the next step or not, and do an RFP to hire. You can call it an authority if you'd like, but or to basically hire someone just like what Senior Service does to run the IRIDE.
Yeah, it's a
But
planning
they
commission-
they could put an RFP out for it as well,
Has the
respond
planning
to
commission
it.
adopted this yet?
Adopted a resolution
Uh-huh.
to send to city
Okay.
council.
Okay, so you'll come to us with
Yes.
that. But the planning commission has looked at it? and-
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, it seems like to me we might not put that on our agenda for the next one. We need to get the information that we requested from
Okay.
Senior Services, and then once we get it, we digest that, then maybe have another discussion.
How do you want that information? You want it brought back as a presentation?
Could you
or-
come back in form of a presentation? And give them?
I don't think that a presentation would necessarily be prudent, because I don't have a problem with it, but I think some of us are concerned with looking at numbers, and I don't know if you want to do a I'd be satisfied if we can get a report with those numbers in them, but a presentation is okay so that citizens might know. That's up to y'all.
I'd like to be as
Well, normally
specific as what
would
you
do
want.
is
So-
You give a report to the city manager, he'd put it in our agenda, and then you come here to answer questions about the report.
I was gonna say, anytime you have a report, you'll have questions.
And then we can do our homework before the council meeting and be able to ask questions or get clarification.
Question, just for clarification. You're saying that we can pass a resolution to have it we'll put in our comprehensive plan, but
Well-
with no expectation of funding? Is
Yeah, the
that-
resolution could be a non-binding resolution. It's a plan. You can adopt a plan but never go with the plan. Or you can have a plan in place, so in case you do want to implement the plan, the funding options are there for you, the grants. Without a plan, the funding is not going to be there.
So it becomes a part of our comprehensive plan, and then we can implement those portions as we see fit.
Exactly. You still have control of it.
Can you come
What-
back?
I mean, Senior Services is going to be running the IRIDE until Southampton or Franklin want to take it over. Or Franklin and Southampton together can take it over.
Finally, my concern, you've been in business, you said 40 years? 40 years. Has at any point, or do you anticipate any long-term commitments that we would have to enter into? We've been into a couple of situations with 20-year commitments. So will we continue to go with annual commitments versus long-term commitments?
I don't know the answer to that question in terms of like a contract type commitment. I can tell you that what Suffolk has done is entered into a 4-year contract with Virginia Regional Transit to run their transportation, their public transportation.
But does Senior Service have any long-term commitments with any of the communities that it's currently serving?
No, sir, we do not. Good, okay, now I understand. No, we do not. We are the designated area agency on aging for Planning and Service Area 20. And we have 40 years of working relationships with all of the elected bodies, and we serve some 15 to 20,000 people a year across the region.
I understand.
But Franklin could decide that this year it's $0 they're going to provide as matching funds. So there's nothing in writing that says, there's no contract.
Mr. Burgess brought up an excellent point. I'm just concerned that we enter into a commitment, and then we find that we have found an alternative that will be more cost-effective for our citizens, and then you say, well, you're in this deal with us for the next such and such, and you're gonna have, you do what you want, but you have to pay us X number of dollars.
That's why what I see typically in the industry, and something we have to look at, is what is the average term for a contract for public transportation. I can tell you the one in Suffolk right now is for 4 years, with the option to extend, which is reviewed annually.
But that's way down the road. We're not even there yet.
Yeah, I'm just about you
We're
guys.
we're not even talking specifically.
And any request you make for a commitment would be the option of this body. We would have say-so on it. So it's not like we're going to magically enter into a contract with you. We have to deliberate that. So.
But say
And we
we,
would have that option.
we did go to like a 2-year contract,
Yep.
you get all these riders around Franklin, and then we come back, decide it's not feasible for Franklin, we bail out. What do you do with these riders that you have? Just stop picking them up?
Stop
Is that what
picking up.
happens?
I believe we had a bus service here once,
Yeah,
and
we
it stopped.
Had cab too?
Private.
And cab service too. So we don't need to do anything tonight, and you'll come to us with information. I think it's a sense of council that you come back with a report and submit it to the city manager for our agenda. And if our agenda for the next meeting would accommodate it, we can have it on the next, can you meet that in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
And I understand that we need salary information, we need the operating budget for IRIDE.
For the IRIDE piece alone.
Okay, IRIDE Franklin, we need salary, the
Corporate.
salary scales, and then.
Corporate, and I don't have a problem if you break down, you don't have to put names,
We won't.
but CEO is paid $100,000 a year. The vice CEO is $89,000. Give us a breakdown of over the company, and then we can, I'd like you to also include what is paid to Franklin workers.
I can identify that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
One other
Thank you.
suggestion, not to belabor it, but you also might want to clarify the relationship that this organization has with the state. As I understand, this is a state agency or subsidiary of sorts. This is not a private nonprofit. This is,
We are.
well, you are, but I mean, you're sanctioned by the state, and
We're an independent 501c3
Mhm.
nonprofit. We're designated pursuant to federal law
Yeah.
as the area agency on aging.
Yeah.
In North Carolina, the area agencies are typically county offices.
yeah, they're county offices, but here, even then, you're the designated agency. No one can compete with you. You're state sanctioned for this area.
I got a question. In the city here, we have, these like vans and all that take people to Norfolk and Suffolk to doctors and all that. Is that tied in to you? Okay.
Not all of it.
No, a lot of
Not all.
Medicaid
There-
vans.
There's a lot of
Medicaid
independents.
transportation.
Because is one person I know has her own, you know, I don't know how many vans she has.
Right.
But she talked about how the insurance was on it, but I was just wondering how the,
It might be helpful if in this report, we also identify the different kinds of transportation
Yeah,
where
okay.
the reimbursement comes from. I'm just thinking for the sake of time this evening.
right, okay.
So you provide the same services as that little van we see riding around saying medical transport?
No, we don't.
You do not.
We're not in competition with the private Medicaid provider.
And they're being reimbursed by Medicaid
Yes,
to take people to the doctor,
Right.
which is not what you're being reimbursed to do.
But how is that different from Our Lady in Hunterdale who needs a ride to her dialysis?
She may not have Medicaid, so therefore she couldn't access that service. We use Over Americans funds and these other public funds that give us the ability to do it. If your lady in Huntersdale is 60 plus, we're golden. If she's under the age of 60, then we gotta cobble something together.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
for
John.
answering all our questions so patiently. Thank you.
No, I do respect the time. I'll just say that what month of the year do you think is the busiest for IRIDE?
December?
The busiest month of the year for IRIDE is which month?
Has to be a cold.
I think December.
December.
It's August.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah,
Back to
and that's the month that you have the highest number of kids riding.
Oh, okay.
It's fascinating to look at the grid.
We'll go ahead and stay on our school time then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is in Airport Industrial Park.
You don't go sit down.
All right. Before you, in your package, I have prepared a memorandum under supervision of Councilman Cheatham as the chairman of our business-friendly committee. The committee has been looking at some of the covenants and restrictions. As you know, we came to you previously with recommendation on the Pretlow Park covenants to vacate those. I think you took action to do that. This is another request similar to that. It's concerning the covenants and restrictions of the Franklin Airport Industrial Park. The purpose of this is, of course, to try to eliminate hurdles for developers coming in to establish new industries and commercial businesses within these areas. We felt like that the land use regulations through the zoning of Alawite County would more than suffice to regulate the types of uses. They are zoned to M1 as well, and the zoning regulations seem to be more than adequate to cover those types of uses. Also attached a copy of the plat of the park, and I think, I don't know if it turned out on, I had put some notes on that plat. I think they got twisted sideways when it was uploaded on. So I'm going to pass out another showing the property. I pointed out one of the properties that now belong to Repair Tech. It used to be Star Paper Tube. Right there when you turn airport to go towards the airport, Franklin Airport.
You had it wrong place there.
Also attached is a copy of the restrictions, the covenants and restrictions. Of course, the process for this would be that you would, based on your action, if you were to agree to vacate these, then it would go to the Industrial Development Authority to ask them to take action to vacate those as well. And that means that they would have two to look at now, Pretlow and the Franklin Airport. We're also looking at the Commerce Park, which are basically...
One or two plots left.
Yeah, one or two plots left.
Are they looking at that already?
Sir?
Are they looking at those other places already? Or are you saying that would be done in the process?
The Commerce Park?
Uh-huh.
No, it's not this process, no.
No, there's only
a couple lots left in there that's developable.
How about Pretlow?
You've already done Pretlow.
I know, we've got those. We're not talking about doing anything with that.
No, we're just talking about the airport.
Yeah, the only thing we have to do remaining on that is if this passes, and then everything will go to the Industrial Development Authority for their approval.
Was economic development at the table when this decision was made?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Amanda
and in
and I
fact, they thought it was a real good decision because what we're doing now is we're satisfying pretty much the same type of covenants, if you will, and ordinances on a dual path to come up to the same place at the end.
So you just have one set of rules?
So just have one set, and in our case with Pretlow, and my understanding in the case and what I've seen of Isle of Wight, theirs surpasses what our covenants are anyway. So there's no sense in having our covenants if they're already covered. And we're just trying to make it a little bit easier for businesses to be able to come in and get things done and accomplished and hopefully up and running.
Not have to go to two jurisdictions to get everything done twice.
Right, exactly.
I asked Barry earlier before the meeting, the only question I had was, does it seem that Isle of Wight's restrictions are no more restrictive than our own, are they?
No.
Okay.
The
concern.
covenants are, if you applied both, the covenants would be a little bit more restrictive than what the zoning.
Okay. We had one business that was very interested in moving into the airport. They couldn't put their project together, but they would want to do aircraft reclamation. And it was not a particularly clean business, but to be out of sight. And if that ever resurrects itself again, I didn't want to be in something that was more restrictive if it
It
turned
would
out
have
to be-
taken, if it was anything that, created any type of nuisance, dust or odors or anything, it would definitely,
Okay.
would have
That
been
was my
restricted.
concern.
And keep in mind, in this particular park, the FAA still has
Oh,
their
sure.
Yes, that's right.
regulations that are going to take precedence over
Right.
any and
They
all.
already have two sets of regulations to go through. If
Right.
we can get this one out of the way, it would only be two instead of three.
So is it appropriate for us to entertain the motion to adopt this resolution?
Or motion to vacate ask the IDA is to vacate.
And does that resolution state that?
Yes, the resolution is sufficient to do what you need to do tonight.
Okay, may I put that on the floor as a motion, and then we'll have additional questions?
That'd be fine.
I'd like to make a motion to vacate the protective covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Franklin Airport Industrial Park and ask the Industrial Development Authority to consider the council's action.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions or discussion?
Question, are there two sets, an original set and an amended copy that we're doing away with?
Yes.
Okay.
And what happened, when the original restrictions went on, it was only for the 6-acre parcel that was being sold to Star Paper Tube, because that was the only piece that had been approved by the FAA. At a later date, we came back and amended so that we included the entire 64 acres in the park. So the only change was to expand the description of the property that was covered.
Which was basically the same, just extended to the other 64?
Extended to the other 58, because the 6 acres was part of the 64.
So you just combine everything, right? When you say 58?
No. When Star Paper Tube wanted to purchase its 6 acres, they did a set of restrictive covenants just for that 6-acre parcel of land. And then shortly after that, they amended the restrictions to expand it to the other 58 acres that are in the park. That's how the 6 and the 58 equal the 64. If you see the map that's been passed out, it says 64 acres. So that's how you get to the 64 acres. The
Okay.
amendment expanded it to be covered by the whole 64 acres.
Okay.
That's all the amendment did.
Any further discussion or question?
No discussion, but just a statement. When we passed the one out at Prutlow, I know Mr. Smolak said that was a big hurdle that had been taken out of the way to help with opening marketing that.
Okay. I have a motion, a second.
You still in question?
We are.
Yes. I would love to say that I could vote on this with total understanding, but there are still some things that, I guess I haven't been able to give enough attention to that I can make that decision. So I'll just ask you this. With all changes, there's a good thing, you change for the good, and there's some bad thing, you're trying to correct something. What is the downside to not doing this, if we don't do this? What is the downside?
I'm not sure that there is one.
Well, the downside would be, you're talking if we don't do it, the downside would be if we get an industrial prospect to come in and they violate our covenants and probably going to violate Isle of Wight, they have to go to Isle of Wight to get it removed or get an exception. Then they have to come to us and get the same restriction removed or allowed for us, an exception. So you're making them do double work, and you're going to keep them from being able to open. And put too many of those in front of somebody, they're going to go someplace else. That's what we're trying to just get it where they go to one place.
When the restrictions, when the restrictions were put on in 1989, Isle of Wight's zoning and subdivision ordinances weren't strong enough. Now their zoning and subdivision ordinances are stronger than what our restrictive covenants are. So we don't need our restrictive covenants. Isle of Wight is
Strengthen theirs so that
Yes.
we should be all on the same sheet of paper.
yes.
Okay.
It's basically an unnecessary administrative requirement that will further delay any business
Right.
interest.
And that's what we tried to do in the committee, was get rid of some of these hurdles to help business come.
That makes sense.
Okay, I have a motion, a second on the floor. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And aye, motion carries. Thank you, Nolan.
May I ask the attorney a question?
Yes, sir.
We've got two passed now, and we're looking about the IDA. Do you have any idea, because we talked about it on the last one, about having them meet because they have to do the final approval. Do you have anything, date or anything kind of planned out for them meeting?
I obviously don't have a date at this point, but I think now we can go forward and contact the people that are on the Industrial Development Authority and find a date that's suitable. Obviously, we have to have a majority present.
Right.
But we can find a date and have the meeting that's necessary and put this before that group and see if they will approve.
In the very near future?
As soon as we can get them all together.
In the very near future.
Good. Thank you, Barry.
As soon as I
The next item on our agenda is a city attorney's report on charter amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The charter amendments, the House Committee did a motion to carry the charter amendments over to the 2013 General Assembly session, and so that was approved on a narrow vote of 11 to 10. And so the Senate Bill 311, which was approved by the Senate but not approved by the House, that bill has been carried over to the 2013 General Assembly session. So I don't think there'll be anything further to occur with the charter amendments in the legislature this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Question.
I'm sorry? Yes.
Regarding, and if you're not sure, Mr. Williams, I can accept you. I'll find out. I wanted to make a motion that we have on this ballot a referendum so that the citizens can have a vote on a recall election provision. Would there be anything that would prevent us from being able to put that on there? Because I'd personally like to see us get one. And if they did say they wanted one, since it was done by way of referendum, could we enact it without having to go through the General Assembly again?
Okay, to answer your last question first, the referendum is simply a process that gets it to the General Assembly. So if you do a referendum, it still has to go through the legislature and could still be changed by the legislature. To answer your first question about do we have enough time to get a referendum on the ballot, I assume you're speaking of the
recall provision.
No, you're speaking of the May ballot, not the November ballot.
Yes, the May ballot.
I would think we would have a very hard time trying to get the referendum together to get it on a ballot for May. It's possible to get it on. I would suggest that you get it on if you want it, you want to pursue it, then put it on the ballot in November. That allows you the entire summer and fall to vet the process out. And still, if it passes through the referendum process, then you'd have plenty of time to get it to the General Assembly.
Get it right so it can get through the General Assembly.
Yes.
I just brought that up because I am one of those in favor of a recall provision in our charter, but I didn't know if we needed to go through the same process. So I was saying May, so that, possibly we could get it on there and get it available to the citizens to use sooner.
Wouldn't be available until it goes back to the General Assembly.
It's got to go back
anyway.
to the General Assembly.
Yeah, and that way, if we do it in November, we have ample time to really work it.
Which is good, because I think that when you're dealing with something like that, you need to have some time to discuss it and work out all the kinks before you send it to the General Assembly.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
To be placed on the ballot, don't you have to go through the process of getting the petition signed?
Yes, the referendum process requires a petition drive to put it on the ballot. And I would point out that there are two ways to get to the General Assembly. The way that we did it was done because that's how the time allowed us to get it there, going through the public hearing process. There's nothing unusual about using the public hearing process. If you do a referendum, you're basically going to be covering the same ground that you have already covered. You will be duplicating an effort that's already been completed. Now, I don't have a problem if y'all want to do that. You can go through that process, but I just need you to understand it's not required. It's already before the legislature. The referendum would be another piece of information that they could consider, but I can't tell you that it's gonna change their opinion one way or the other. It would be duplicating the process that's already been completed.
It's really, the bill is already before the Senate and the House to be reconsidered next year.
It's been passed by the Senate and will be considered by the House. It would be a duplication of what's already been done. I'm not saying don't do it, but I just want you to understand that you'll be duplicating a process that's already been completed.
Well, actually, I don't think we would be duplicating it because the amendment was put before the General Assembly or the House Committee on behalf of the Senate was not the amendment as written and explained in the public hearing. Because the public hearing, as it was written and submitted by Mr. Rainey, it included the citizens having the option to participate in the election of a predecessor. However, what you put forth at the General Assembly, or what you recommended, took the citizens out of the process and left it in the hands of the council. So I believe the referendum could be, do the citizens want to be a part of the recall or replacement process? So I think that it wouldn't be a duplication, and if we went forward with the same legislation that has been introduced just in 2013, we would have the same problem we had the first time, because there are those who believe the citizens have the right to replace whoever is recalled. So that's why I wanted to put that forth to the citizens. Do they want the council to appoint replacements, or do they want to pick the replacements? And that we could do before the General Assembly, so we wouldn't be duplicating the process.
Just a comment. Any citizen can head a petition drive. It does not have to be council members. It is not the council. Any citizen can do the filing and have a petition drive.
For the referendum.
We've done that, yeah.
And with all due respect to what you said, Councilman McLemore, I would say to you that the council passed a resolution that said if there was a successful recall, that council would make a appointment to fill the vacancy. That was a council resolution. When the bill went back up to the General Assembly, when that resolution was carried back to the General Assembly, once again, the language was amended. There was an amendment made that stated if there was a successful referendum, council would make an interim appointment, and then at the next election, the position would be up for a term that would fill the unexpired portion. And so it was put back into the hands of the people. There would be an interim election, but the appointment by council, but that would only last until such time as there was another election.
And
so it's still in the hands of the people.
That was the amendment offered by the Senate, the House. That was
Yes.
not the doing of the city.
Yes.
Right, and the original in the Senate was that what I think they had problems with was that during the vote on the recall, there would also be the people would also be voting on the successor, and they had a problem with it being at the same time, if there was successful recall.
Well, I don't want to argue all the points, but I think that the actual concern was that the person that was being recalled couldn't participate on the ballot to be his own successor.
Right.
Because it doesn't make in my mind, it does not make a whole lot of sense to do a recall petition only to have the person that got recalled be elected to fill his own vacancy. And so that's a difference. That point was a sticking point for the General Assembly, and they did not want to approve although they approved it last year for Portsmouth, they didn't want to approve it for us this year.
Right.
And so that's the way it is.
I'd just like to add that with the exception of yourself, Mr. Williams, the only two on this dais that had as much experience with every General Assembly hearing was Councilman Bly and myself. So I'm very aware exactly what happened. I was there for every blow. And we were excluding in this second amendment, excluding the citizens to the degree, after 1 year, our council terms are 4 years. After the first year, if you call for a recall on someone, then this council would appoint the person who would serve out the remaining 3 years. So therefore, to allude to the fact that it would be temporary and then the citizens could pick the replacement, yes, the citizens could pick the replacement, but it might be after 3 years. And I don't think that's the will of the people. The people want to pick their replacement. So that's the difference.
I think you were wasting some time tonight and talking about that only from the standpoint, we're gonna have the summer and the fall to get worded what we want, put it up for either
Public hearing.
put it up for a referendum or not. We'll make that decision later on. So debating the merits of this at this point is carried over. There's no action to be taken. Mr. Martin?
We only talked about one provision. There were other provisions. Not that I need to speak for them, but that committee did a lot of work, and they felt like that was good governance. We still maintain that it's good governance. When we discussed it, I think we need to discuss those 4 points. Not that we need to go forward with all four, but we need to bring all 4 of them back and decide whether we want to go forward.
Well, I think we need to bring the other 5 that were overlooked when you did this to bring it all up.
True.
To be fair to all citizens,
Your
not
turn.
just a handful.
We'll have an opportunity to do that. We're not gonna do anything about it tonight. We're gonna have something.
Well, I think we're getting a discussion on charter tonight, but anyway.
We'll develop a process to vet all of that and have it up for the public consumption.
Mr. Mayor, before we leave that, could we have a timeline developed of of what the process needs to be so we don't get jammed up and get where we have to make a decision in a hurry? Would that be?
Well, when you say a timeline, am I to make an assumption that you want to look at a referendum?
I would. I want the people to have a
And
say-so.
if you're looking at a referendum, as already pointed out by the vice mayor, the people can start a referendum process tomorrow by doing a petition. That's all it takes.
Well,
They gotta do a petition and get signatures.
All due respect, Mr. Williams, we did have 5 more citizens came in, but we tabled that and just went along with the first group gave.
They were never tabled. I gave an explanation of those 5 amendments, and council never asked me to do anything further with it. It
And
was
as I
not ever
recall-
tabled.
Well,
As I recall, there never was a motion.
Right now, we're talking about, do we wanna have a referendum?
That's on the citizen.
And
I
once again, that's
think
up
we
to the
don't need to
citizens.
really get
Okay.
into it tonight.
Citizen-driven.
Right.
Okay.
Since we can't do it on the May ballot, then
No.
I don't see why we need to deal with it now.
What we need to do as far as the government is concerned and the citizens, what we need to do as far as the citizens are concerned, the government is concerned, is if a referendum is requested by petition, then we will respond to the petition.
Right.
And we will at that point set a date. So if people want to have this, it has to be, if it has to be on the November ballot, something has to be done this summer. It can be done now, it can be done later. But a petition needs to be drafted, and somebody needs to circulate it, if there's an interest in doing that. It can be us, it can be the citizen.
I would think if council did it, we need to wait till after we get through the budget process and get some of that.
Well, I would think there's no hurry to get to it until after July 1 anyway.
I
That's what I'm
agree.
saying.
I agree.
And then, if there's energy in the community to do a referendum, we do it.
I agree.
But like Mr. Williams said, it's required, we need to respond to it if it's a petition, and if there isn't, then we don't. Right. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Martin, your report.
At this point, I don't have anything to report other than what's in the agenda. I think we need some time on this electric report, when we get to that.
All right. Before we get to that, we had amended our agenda to include a brief discussion on political signs. Mr. McLemore, that was your request?
Yes, I noticed, what brought this about was I got a call from a constituent when they saw signs already being put up. And we've been through a collectively close to 14 elections between the members that are sitting on this dais. And I think that we pretty much, particularly in 3 of our cases, we've been through more than one election. So when we got this thing in the mail, City of Franklin political sign guidelines, it pretty much didn't catch a whole lot of attention because we knew you put your signs up 30 days ahead of time, you take them down within 30 days, they can't be in certain places. And we didn't give it a lot of attention. Well, when that came, the citizen called me. I said, well, signs aren't supposed to be up till at least 30 days before the election. So I called Ms. Maynard, and she told me that, oh, no, it's 90 days. Well, I discovered that the change had occurred in 8/23/10. So all of us had already completed the last election. So I think that it would, it kind of caught us by, myself and from what I understand, the mayor by surprise because we were used to the old guidelines, 30 days. So, and without reading it. And when I started to look into it and called her, I went down to speak to Mr. Goodwin, and he had said that that was his mistake. He had used the guidelines for real estate signs for the political campaign sign guidelines. Now, I spoke to Councilman Bly earlier, and he said, when did they do that? It's the same thing that happens up at the General Assembly.
Let me speak up for myself. 1 minute. You said,
You asked, when did they do that?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of it. That's the reason I asked the question. Because
Okay,
when I ran,
that's what I said.
I didn't want to speak for myself in that.
Well, I didn't know you were going to ask.
Go ahead.
So anyhow, to make a long story short, I think that there are provisions. Mr. Goodwin went and made the revisions to give us the upgraded version as of 8/20, as of revised on 3/9, which was a couple of days ago. Now, when this was approved by council in July,
It was amended on 8/23/10.
April, I'm sorry. When it was amended, we didn't look through this because anyone who had any experience with running a campaign would have recognized the deficiencies, such as we are saying you can put your signs up 90 days in advance. Well, the state doesn't even qualify a candidate officially until March 16th. So in order to be within 90 days, you would have to, the election would be May 16th. Well, the election is May 1st. So it's inside of 90 days, or you're allowing citizens or potential candidates to go put out signs when they haven't even been officially qualified to be on the ballot. This was simply an oversight. Yes, you can do it, because you can qualify. You start running on January 1st. That's when you can start putting your paperwork and stuff in. As soon as you get your paperwork in, if you want to run out and start, getting signs, you can start putting them up 90 days in advance. But it's kind of silly to allow people to put up campaign signs until they've been officially qualified to be on the ballot. So therefore, I think that we need to look at amending this to state that you cannot put up political signs until you're qualified to be on the ballot officially. Now, others who have experience with elections know 30 days is fine, because by the time those signs get rained on, the wind blows them, people take them, all kinds of things, you really don't want your signs up any more than 30 days. But because the people who
Opinion.
Well, fine, so they can put them up as early as they want. I'm just saying, from experience and talking to the mayor on the phone, he agreed, 30 days is fine. So I'm not saying move it back to 30 days. Now, where did this 90 days come from? From what I was told, Mr. Goodman was told by the city attorney that someone in the state had challenged the 30 days as not being enough time. Subsequently, we up and changed ours to 90 days. I don't think we would have taken into consideration that it's reasonable to say no one can put up signs until they're officially qualified to be on the ballot. I don't think that's unreasonable. So I think that we need to pay more attention to when we vote to approve things, because we actually approved, and hadn't I caught this, it says, there shall be no more than one political campaign sign on each street frontage. Now, going through the General Assembly, I've learned that language is possible, is important. And someone could argue the case that you can only put one sign per street frontage. You put one sign on South Street, and that's all can go on South Street. One sign on Bank Street, that's all can go on Bank Street. So that was obviously ludicrous. So that was stripped out. Also, no political sign shall be placed within less than 8 feet from the edge. Again, that was taken out because these are signs that are ordinances required for real estate signs that stay there for long periods of time. So it was taken out. So now I'm like, okay, before we just say, let's move forward, now that we've taken out those two things, since this body has the authority to look at things, there was a provision that I would like you to consider relooking at. And that is, no political campaign sign shall be placed on any city right-of-way. Political campaign signs found in the city right-of-way will be removed and discarded. Now, I thought it was worthy of this. Excuse me?
It's already there. You can't put it.
That's why I'm saying we have the authority now that we're looking at this to consider if that's one we want to keep also. And I would argue or ask that you consider that this is a public election voted on by our public, and we won't allow the candidates to put a sign on public property. I don't think that's a big deal. I think the citizens wouldn't mind if the sign was in the median opposed to having to be in their yard. We have the authority to make this so that it's more conducive for the people who are campaigning. These are elected officials that we're selecting, but we won't allow the elected officials to use public property. They're not for profit, so we could put a city sign in the median, but we won't allow our elected officials to put their signs in the median. And I just think that we would make it more easy for all candidates if we were to eliminate that, and that is within our power. So if you don't want to, fine, leave it like it is. I done ran 2 campaigns like that, and I'll continue to. But I do think it would make it easier, because there's also people who don't want you to put a sign in their yard. But there's a median that is convenient right there. That would allow a person campaigning to be able to put a sign on what's city property.
Okay, Ms. McLemore, any other item?
That's the only one now that the other 2 have been stricken, but I would urge the same way we all of these, and if I hadn't caught it, we would have to live by all of these, but luckily Mr. Goodwin took it out. I think that we need to pay more attention to the things that we approved, and this was put into a signed ordinance that I believe received a unanimous vote. And if it was a good thing, then why did he take it out? Obviously, it wasn't a good thing, but we voted for it. So therefore, you know,
I'd like a point of clarification. We have a revised form here, and I'm interested to know what the revision was done based upon. I mean, how did we get from one page to the other? Is there an explanation for that?
If you look at this sign ordinance, and it was my mistake, and I do apologize for that. I created this document. I did not just make copies of the ordinance and send out so you would have to refer from one section to another section. I put this together myself. I created that several years ago, and nothing has ever come up until Mr. McLemore brought it up, but the ordinance says that political signs shall not be placed until 90 days prior to the election. It used to say 30, but based on Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional for 30 days or even 60 days.
Right.
So Planning Commission felt, well, let's go 90 days. That hasn't been contested. We'll go with that. So that's what it was changed. The second statement in that ordinance says that such signs shall comply with the size requirements of real estate signs. Just the size requirements. So I went to the real estate sign section and pulled those sections out of the real estate sign section and applied them to the handout, but I included two sections of the real estate signs that should not have gone into the handout.
Okay.
Okay? Which was the part about one per lot front, street front, which in real estate signs, that's one per lot, per street front. So if you have a corner lot, you can have two for sale signs. And the setback issue, that does not apply.
So
That's it.
the advisory piece that you created for our benefit is compliant with the ordinance
Yes,
itself?
it is.
Okay.
It is.
The
And there was-
revised one, the revised.
The revised
revised
one.
one.
Yeah, it was
Is
a-
in
I took out
compliance,
two sections.
and it was a helpful aid to us so that we wouldn't have to go through the code.
Right.
Okay.
So it's 90 days, right?
90 days is what the ordinance says.
All right,
And
so,
as we understand that, that was done because of Supreme Court ruling, which said it was illegal to do 6:30 or 60. Both of those dates have been contested, and we attempted to comply with what we hoped would be acceptable by the Supreme Court.
when did that come out of the Supreme Court?
1996.
You got a document on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me have one of those.
Was that the federal Supreme Court or state Supreme Court?
Federal it's what they call a Fed Sup case, which means it's federal district court. There's a federal district court decision in 1996 and another federal district court decision in 1999. The one in 1996, the locality had a 15-day limitation. You couldn't put signs out until 15 days before the election. There was a challenge to that. They went back and changed the ordinance from 15 days to 45 days. There was a challenge to the 45-day limitation. That went to federal district court, and the federal district court struck it down as being unconstitutional infringement on First Amendment free speech. The 1999 case was a ordinance on 60 days, and the federal district court struck that limitation down, saying that that was once again an unconstitutional infringement upon First Amendment free speech right. There has been nothing from any court. You have to understand, courts don't make legislation, legislators make legislation. The court can say that it's unconstitutional, so there has been no guidance to tell us what is an appropriate limitation for putting up signs. I can't tell you that some court somewhere has said that 61 days is an appropriate time limit. I can't tell you that 75 days is an appropriate time limit. I can tell you 15 days has been struck down. I can tell you 45 days has been struck down, and I can tell you that 60 days has been struck down. When this came up in 2008, we had this conversation, and I instructed community development that they could not enforce the ordinance of 30 days at that time. If somebody put a sign up ahead of that, then and challenged us, that we would lose that case, that I could not defend it. We waited some time because there was a revision of the sign ordinance, and so as that worked through the process, it went to the Planning Commission, and once again, the explanation was made at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission said, well, let's go at 90 days. And so at 90 days, that's what came to council, and that's what was approved. And so that's how we got to 90 days. If someone wants to challenge it, I can't tell you that I can defend 90 days. The Supreme Court might say that limitation is also unconstitutional because it's an infringement on free speech.
So, 2008, you said this came out?
No, sir.
2008
is when we had the discussion about our ordinance at 30 days, and I said it was unconstitutional and we should not be enforcing it. That has nothing to do with the federal cases that I've talked to you about.
And then it was finally amended in 2010.
Right, 2010.
As part of the process of
we were
reviewing.
running in violation of the law then, weren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, I mean, my two elections, I had 30 days, so we were, anyway, that's what older damn, man.
But I think we also need to keep in mind, this is a very genetic political science. We're taking it that it means just us sitting up here. It's political science.
No, I'm not taking that way.
I'm just saying, it's political science.
And that's why I'm
Overall,
saying.
the reference has been just us, but it's for all political
Yeah,
science.
exactly.
Whether it's president, senator, or us.
So therefore, that's why, my only thing that I'm asking is that we all would pay a little more attention when these things are passed, because I don't recall any discussion regarding the political signs when we passed them. It was a part of the city sign ordinance. Could you tell me who was in the, involved in the creation of the city sign ordinance?
Downtown Development Association, Business Friendly, we had several public hearings on it at Planning Commission level. There was a public hearing on it at City Council, the Planning Commission, staff, City Attorney's Office.
So everybody...
I know for a fact that this was discussed in detail, because the 45 and the, didn't remember
We
the
did
15,
discuss
the
this.
45 and the 60 was very definitely flushed out and said, you know, we got to go beyond 60, don't know what 61 or 90 is, and we picked 90 as a reasonable amount, which...
So, because that wasn't the indication you gave me when we spoke. You said you thought it was 30 days before and 30 days after. You didn't tell me that we had, Greg, don't you
Well,
recall?
I didn't have this in front of me. I was in
discussed-
Texas, and I didn't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
I
but
said-
you said you
What I
remember-
said was 30 days is fine for me.
And it was fine for me.
Okay, but
I
it's
don't
90
know how it
days,
is.
and that's
I
fine.
mean, I believe we had this discussion on the political signs during the process.
This whole thing has been really vetted by a bunch of different folks trying to
The
figure out
90
what was
days
the
is
best
fine.
thing for everybody.
I mean, it's a lot more lenient, I mean.
I think
So would
also
y'all
that-
consider putting allowing signs on public property? Or no, y'all ain't gonna do that?
You have a problem that the state says you cannot put signs on the state right-of-way. And so what you would really be looking at is trying to make a determination of whether a sign was on public right-of-way, which was wider than the state right-of-way. So if you're talking about putting a sign on a median, that's probably the state right-of-way, which probably means that you're going to be in violation of state law, not necessarily the city's law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for the clarification. Next item on our agenda is financial matters, and the first item is budget amendment for the school board. Ms. Rollins?
Good evening, Mayor Council,
Good evening.
Vice Mayor Johnson, other council members, Mr. Martin, Mr. Williams, good evening.
Good evening.
Before you tonight, you have a request from the Franklin City Public Schools to amend the current fiscal year 11-12 budget to reflect the award of various state, local, and federal grants. The aggregate amount of the amendments is $72,684. The supporting documentation has been reviewed by staff and appears to be in order. The action for council tonight would be to amend the fiscal year 11-12 school system budget to reflect the award of the federal grants and to appropriate those funds for expenditure, $72,684.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt that resolution 2012-17?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Did you,
I'm sorry.
Benny usually has discussion.
I'm sorry, apologize.
The only discussion I have is, I didn't catch the number. These are all the things for the schools?
Yes.
That is correct.
On this particular one.
And all in grant.
Is the
Grants received.
Educational Foundation included in that?
No.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, it's down the line.
Is it on
not
this?
in this one.
It's not in this one?
No,
It's not
Okay.
but it's down the line.
Yeah.
It's-
I don't have a problem with it.
At some point in time, can you get them to get an answer to me? One thing I had a question about, what is the Education Jobs Grant,
Okay,
and what does that do? That's for another day,
okay.
but if you'll ask, I want to know what that is. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Next item?
We're gonna vote on them all at one time, or we're gonna take care of the motion on the floor?
I'm sorry, I didn't get a vote. I had a second, and then I went to question. All in favor of 2012-17, signify by saying aye.
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 And aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, Stephen, on the next one.
we're ready to proceed with the
Yes,
next
ma'am.
agenda item?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay, I
please.
need to get it set up on the PowerPoint.
We're going to the electric. Going to the electric.
No, she's got to finish up hers. She's got several more.
I think we put them all together.
Well,
And that's what I was asking, because I should have abstained in that vote, because I'm a party to that contract. I'm a party to one of the amendments, and I wanted to abstain.
I apologize, because I was thinking that next...
Well, I'll just
I thought
abstain,
that
if you just
next
record my
page-
vote as an abstain, because that's why I asked that question. I didn't.
The following documentation I thought was for additional amendments. And
I think that was cumulative.
that's just backup information, so...
But I don't see it included in that
Yeah,
budget amendment. It
Yeah,
is included.
it's in there. The
All right.
very last one, $2,000-some.
If we do that, I would just ask that the vote stands and we add a notation that you brought it to the attention of the council, that you weren't given an opportunity to abstain.
What, Benny, where is it? I don't see it.
It's not in the 2012 7.
It's
I don't
not
see
in
it in
there.
2012 7.
That is not.
Well, it wasn't.
17, you mean?
17.
And it's
Wait a minute.
down
Yeah, it's not in the 72,000.
It's in the next letter.
Can you answer that question,
See,
Melissa?
that's why I'm confused. I can't follow it in here.
Here, look at
The-
putting down the paper is good.
I know it, I can't
Mr.
follow it.
Burgess had
sorry,
a
what's the
question about the
question?
$2,000 and change grant. He needs to abstain on that. Was that included in the 72,684 that's included in Budget Amendment 17?
Which grant is that, I'm sorry, Mayor? Which grant are we talking about specifically?
I think you're talking about Fund 1800 for $2,070, and on your follow-up pages, it's listed, but in the amendment itself, it was not.
Okay, all right, I didn't have the attachments. I can certainly check on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think that's what Mr. Burgess was concerned about. He wanted to at least acknowledge his
There is an explanation of the education job, in there.
There's a letter in there. It's for that.
Okay, I can explain that. Okay, you're talking about the Franklin City Educational Foundation, the award for $2,795.
Yeah, is that included in the budget amendment?
It is. What it is, if you would look on page 2 of that letter, there are 4 items actually that comprise that amount. The fund number 250-0001, all of those were added together, so that is included in that amount.
Okay, so,
So how can I correct this?
Motion to reconsider.
yeah.
Say that again, Mr. Williams?
Motion to reconsider. What you need to do is
Yeah,
make a
you may make
motion
a
to
motion on the
reconsider,
prevailing
go
side.
back and undo it, and then redo it and abstain.
I make a motion to reconsider the vote we just took.
The adoption
The option
of...
of the budget
Budget
amendment.
Amendment 17.
17.
I have a motion on the floor to
Second.
a motion and second to reconsider
Do I get
the
that
vote
on
on 2012-17. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. And now, aye. And now a motion to adopt the 2012-17 amendment.
So moved.
Second, motion is second?
Second.
Second. Now, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
5-0 with one abstain. Thank you, Benny. Now, I'm not sure I know where that showed up,
It's the very last page, when we get to the electric department.
but it was grouped in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
No more amendments, financial?
No more.
Okay.
No, sir.
And
Okay.
Ms. Johnson told me that there was something in here about the jobs thing. I'll just have to
That's
find
that
it.
letter, right? That's the letter.
Oh, here it is. Thank you. I'll take that home and read it. I just didn't have access to all that. Okay. Next on our agenda is the electric fund.
Okay. At the February 27th meeting, council raised questions regarding the cash balance reported in the electric fund at January 31st, 2012 versus the same period last fiscal year. The financial report basically showed that there was about a $1 million decrease between the two periods. According to the January financial report, cash reported in the fund was $1,691,987 at January 31st, 2011, versus $686,341 at January 31st, 2012. This brings us to our presentation this evening, in which we will attempt to explain the factors that have attributed to the decline in the fund's cash balance. In determining these factors, Council, we need to look at both components. We need to look at the factors that are impacting, of course, our revenue, and the factors that are impacting, of course, the expenditures. We want to bear in mind that when we talk about revenue for the election fund, because it's an enterprise fund, we want to keep in mind that we're talking about cash actually received, not necessarily billed. So we're talking about cash that the treasurer is taking in, not necessarily cash that's billed from the utility bills. Between fiscal year 2011 to 2012, when we're looking at our revenue, we can see that the revenues increased during that period by $226,207. In contrast, looking at the expenditures, we see that the expenditures actually increased by over $1 million, about $1.2 million. And of course, the number that we were talking about was the increase in the cash balance, the decrease in the cash balance, about that $1 million. So you can do the math. You see you got your variance there in your revenues, $226,000. You got your variance there in your expenditures. So those two equate to a net about $1 million. The next slide is a month-to-month comparison of the revenues from fiscal year 2011 and 2012. Basically, this slide was prepared to kind of support the slide, to support the previous slide. In other words, we had just mentioned that the revenues overall increased by the $226,207. There we go, right there. So this is just a month-to-month calculation of how we came with that $226,000 increase in the revenue. By the same token, when you're looking at your expenses, we had indicated on the previous slide that the expenses actually increased by $1.2 million. This is the slide that shows the expenses from fiscal year 2011 to 2012. And as you can see there, the expenditures for July 1st through January actually decreased by that $1.2 million. This is just a month-to-month comparison. This particular slide is the year-to-date cash balance summary. What we wanted to show you here is the actual impact on the cash balance when taking into consideration the revenues and the expenses. In other words, it's just as simple. When you have more cash going out than you have coming in, you're going to have a variance in your month-to-month cash balance. This would happen in this particular case. You have all the months have a negative variance between what you're bringing in versus what a negative variance between what we're expending and what we're bringing in, and all the months with the exception of October there, where you actually brought in more money than was actually expended. And of course, what you're going to have a declining balance. So this particular slide kind of shows you at the beginning of the fiscal year, you had that cash balance there of $1.3 million, $1,320,285. When you take into consideration from July all the way to January, all the variances, the negative variances that you see here from month to month, the bottom line impact is a $633,944 variance, decline in that cash balance from July 1st through January 31st, 2012. This particular slide shows the various expenditure components, because we did mention there was such a huge difference in terms of the variance from one fiscal year to the next. I thought it was important to kind of explain the different components of the different expenditure components of the fund. Right here, it kind of shows that the primary impact, reason or the primary factor that kind of influencing that $1.2 million loss that you see here, the variance, for a better choice of words, is the actual increase that we are paying this year to the Virginia Municipal Electric Association. Here you can see that we're spent $1.3 million more in fiscal year 2012 than what we spent in the previous fiscal year. So that by itself is the major culprit in terms of the decrease, in terms of the increase in the expenditures. Your other items, your payroll, as you can see, that remains relatively constant, $543,000 in fiscal year 2011 versus $600,000 in fiscal year 12. And the primary reason for that is you can see that September payment there. All the other ones are kind of constant. The only reason why you have that increase in that September payment is because that's associated with some Hurricane Irene expenditures for payroll. For your other accounts payable, which comprise of your transfers from the electric fund, in addition to your monthly routine accounts payable, you can see that you actually increased that by $159,000. And you expect that because your fiscal year 12 budgeted transfer actually decreased overall by that $150,000, the action that was taken by council. So we did expect, for the most part, if your other accounts payable are going to remain relatively consistent, then that's why we saw that slight increase in the actual, the decrease in the actual other accounts payable line item there. Okay. This is just a graphic that kind of explains what was just presented to you in the earlier slide. Basically, it tells you that about 3/4 or 75% of the expenditures for the electric fund are associated with our payments to VEMA for our wholesale energy charges. Our payroll only comprises about 7%. Our operating expenditure is about 6%. And our transfers to the general fund at $1,075,000 comprises about 7% of the total expenditures for the electric fund. And this is fiscal year 12. Okay, you've seen the numbers, and what we're going to do now is kind of give you just a little bit of background data behind the numbers. This is a series of events as we know them. Cost for wholesale energy for resale increased 14% with the new power contract that was effective January 2011. There was another rate increase because Dominion increased its rate. That was done July 1st, 2011, and that was about 3.5% increase. So we got the 14% increase January 2011. There was another increase July 1st, 2011. As a result, of course, we're going to have an increase in our monthly kilowatt hour charges. In essence, we're paying more for power. These costs were fully absorbed by the city for 8 months. From January 2011 through August 2011, you had a 17.5% rate increase. The city absorbed the cost of this rate increase. So what happened after August 2011? Council took action effective September 2011 to approve the recommended 10% increase to the kilowatt hour charge for energy and the demand charge. Okay. We do note there was a net impact to our customers of about 7 to 8%, averaging less than $8 per month. The net impact to the city, no additional revenue. There was pretty much a break-even point to cover the cost of power and operations. In other words, the budgeted revenue from this particular increase, when you compare it to the actual operating expenditures, was supposed to be enough just to cover the cost of operations. These are the various factors that impacted the revenue. Again, the rate increase occurred September 2011. It did not occur at the beginning of the fiscal year. So because that increase did not occur in the fiscal year, there were some missed opportunities for some additional revenue. That says July and August, but actually that should be August and September since we actually bill one month behind. But in essence, you're talking about 2 months where the city could have received $150,000 from that 2-month period at the beginning of the fiscal year. And we do know that there always is a revenue billed versus revenue collected component. Despite all of our collection efforts, we know that not all billed revenue is actually collected. Just a case in point, there is a large customer that is no longer in the city, and because of that, that customer was actually paying the city about $35,000 a month in utility fees. About 7-month period, that's $250,000, what I consider to be lost revenue. However, we do want to point out that we do understand that that demand for that particular business is no longer there, so there is some offsetting costs. But for illustrative purposes, we just kind of wanted to show you that that could be the potential impact. The next item, our payment for our wholesale energy increased increased by $1.35 million, or 26% from the same period in fiscal year 2011. Again, as we stated before, the revenues only increased about $226,000. All of these things are mitigating factors to your revenue. And of course, we do recognize that the fund is due some monies from the Hurricane Irene expenses, so it's short right now of about $40,000, and I showed you that in the payroll example. All of this is summarized. Basically, expenditures have outpaced the revenues. Particularly the cost for power, as other expenditures, as I showed you in the earlier slide, have remained fairly constant. Revenue losses have significant impact to the cash balance. We identified the $250,000, we identified the $40,000, that's $290,000 identified as due to the fund. The large account in the Irene, again, recognize there is some offset in there, but it's not been identified specifically for this illustration. And of course, the delay of the rate increase of September 2011 had financial implications as the power cost increased January 2011.
Melissa, if we could, when you finish this slide, before we go to questions, I wanted to supplement your comments.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And the revenue not collected, we do understand, as a result of unpaid utility accounts, does have an adverse impact on the cash balance. So in essence, again, at your last meeting, you wanted to be able to get a better understanding of how the cash balance went from decreased by the $1 million. So hopefully these series of events that have been presented before you will kind of give you a better understanding of how we at least have gotten to the cash balance point at this particular time.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, and council, after reviewing this information, I was obviously very concerned, being relatively new on the job, so I did ask the department head as well as Ms. Rollins to get together and try to simplify this and put it on a timeline, a summary timeline. So we've supplemented your report tonight and handed it out at your place at the dais. And we would like to walk through that before we get into questions. And my whole purpose with this was trying to get something that was simplified to the degree that we'll be able to see the chronology and the way this series of events and how it numerically impacted, which is included in the report, but sometimes difficult to dig out. And we also want to bring into consideration the cash recovery and policy guidelines that the city has had in place for a number of years with regard to all funds, but specifically how it impacts on the electric fund, to put this in perspective, and then talk about next steps on how we can fix this.
Okay. All right. With that said, as Mr. Martin alluded to, we kind of provided a series of events, and we started back in fiscal year 2011. Now, do pardon that this is kind of small and maybe a little bit difficult to see, but I tried to color code it so you can understand exactly the numbers that are being impacted based on the discussion. Again, I'm starting with fiscal year 2011 because I kind of wanted to give you a guideline as to where the fund started, at what point. You can see that from July of 2011 all the way down to November, you can see that the fund was actually making money. The fund balance was $1,302,000 at the end of July. At the end of December, it actually was $1.711 million. So the fund actually made money, $406,315 from that particular period. So what happened after December? You talked about the rate increase. So in December, as you can see here, there was the rate increase, the 14% that was mentioned. Look at the difference between your BEMA payment from December to January, from $675,000 to, I'm having a hard time seeing that myself. $1,605,000, okay? So again, so that's where we are. That's where you are January 2011. Let's take you through the next step, a series of events. In February, March, April, and May, what's going to happen there? You had the rate increase, so naturally, what's going to happen? There's going to be some variances, some negative variances. Your fund is going to start to lose money. You did not have a rate increase to kind of offset the increase for the power for the VEMA contract. So naturally, you're going to see some negative variances here. So for all the way from January, where you had that balance right there of the 1.6 million, to June at the end of the fiscal year, it was back to 1.3 million. So in essence, for the whole fiscal year, 2010, 2011, the fund actually only increased about $15,000. Now, one of the questions you may ask is, how was we able to accommodate that increase right there? And one of the reasons is because there was over a $400,000 amount set aside in reserves, okay? And that reserves had mitigated the impact there in terms of you had the power rate increase, that money was budgeted in reserves for capital initiatives, but basically that reserves had to be used to kind of offset that increase because that rate was effective January 2011. All right, let's continue on. Now we're in the next fiscal year.
Can you go back to that VME payment column?
Yes.
What are you comparing that to? Is that just the net increase in expense?
No, you mean the 675 and the 1 million?
Well, starting in July, it's 778, or 787.
No, that's the actual payment.
Yeah, that's
Those
the
are actual
payment
payments.
for that month, or the prior month, I guess.
Yes.
So where is the differential between what was paid before, or what was, you're talking about a variance, or a variation, and I'm trying to figure out where that is.
I'm trying to understand where you are.
Is it on 10 and 11?
Okay, we're on 10 and 11, that's right. At these these right here are actual VEMA payments, okay? These are the payments, okay? These are kind of put here so you can kind of see, you know, that this is the majority of why your balance is the way it is, okay? Maybe it's confusing you in terms of it really doesn't have any correlation in terms of trying to add the numbers in the preceding columns. We just wanted to kind of...
Yes, that's exactly right. This is just showing your perspective of the month of July. We had a cash balance of $1,302,759, July of 2010, and we made a payment of $787,922. There is no correlation except they both happened in July.
Okay.
The other expenses would total up, and you balance that against the revenue on the other slide she showed earlier, and you would net out what the change was in each month. And that's where this variance comes in.
Well, what is the first column?
First month is the 1 month, the second column is cumulative of the first.
I understand that. What is that column?
The month-to-month variance, that's the variance between the cash in and the cash out.
Total.
Okay. All right. So you go from 1.3 plus 200,000 to 1.517. Okay, I see that. Okay.
All right.
Okay. I got it.
Okay. All righty.
That wasn't explained. I didn't see it. Okay.
All right.
Go.
All right. Now we're in the next fiscal year. We're in fiscal year 11-12. Let's see what happens, and let's look at the next series of events. That beginning balance is the same as your ending balance in the previous slide of June 30th at the $1,320,285. Okay. So in July, we had indicated that there was another increase, a 3.5% increase that was effective. Okay, your cash balance, go back.
That's good.
Yeah. Your cash balance went from 1.3 million July, okay, you lost $105,000, 1.2 million. Continue on in August, lost another amount, so that brings that cash balance to $922,000. And the reason being is because the city has absorbed the increase for 8 full months. Overall, there was a $769,948 cash reduction since January 2011 when the rate became effective. Okay, the next series of events happened, of course, in September 2011, as mentioned earlier, where council did approve a 10% rate increase, net 7 to 8%. And we do know that we did not feel the impact of that increase until the next month in October. And we are attributing that actual positive variance in October to that particular rate increase that was made effective September 2011. As you can see, the fund did increase by $102,000 there. increasing from $839,000 to $941,000. Do not have any type of explanation as to what happened in the months of November and December. There's a lot of intricate details involved with power and electricity, so they could have some factors in there. But nevertheless, we just want to kind of bring you to where the discussion started in terms of where we were at January 31st, 2012. And that brings you to the $686,000 in the cash balance. The reduction in cash balance since January 2011, the $1,005,645.
And that's when I asked Ms. Rollins to take a look at, we'll flip over the next page and she'll go through it. What is going to happen between now and June 30th based on what we know? Because obviously, I wanted to get a handle on where we were going to be at the end of the fiscal year if all things stay equal and our projections are fairly accurate.
Okay. Now, by no means we want to kind of write these numbers down and say this is what it's going to be, because as Mr. Martin alluded to, this is just a projection. And I've kind of learned just a little time I've been here that it's kind of hard to project actual revenue from the rate increases. So again, these are just projections, but again, we want to kind of provide you some projections as to where the fund would be at the end of June 30th, 2012. And by doing so, it was sort of kind of easy for us to say, okay, we know what our payroll is going to be, we kind of know what our transfer is going to be, and pretty much no huge expenditures. We kind of know what our accounts payable are going to be. It's kind of hard to project that revenue. We based the VEMA, I'm going to have to learn this quicker. We based the VEMA payments on the projections that we have already received from GDS, the company. I do not know the acronym for GDS. But anyway, we based those particular expenses that you see there in purple based on the estimates that they provided us, and Mr. Bly has kind of adjusted those because we have a milder winter than was projected. Okay, so that's where we're projecting our VEMA payments are going to be. Our revenue, even though it's not shown here, was based on projections from February through June of the previous fiscal year. We do understand that there was a rate increase in there sometimes, so I sort of kind of increased those projections of about 5% to kind of give us a feel of what our revenues would be for those particular 5 months to the end of June. So based on that, the best projection that we can give you at the time is that at the end of June 30th, 2012, the actual cash in the electric fund would be about $385,000, which means that it would decline another $302,000 from January 2012 to June 30th, 2012.
And our expectation, I guess I ought to knock on wood, would be that this would be worst case scenario.
Yes.
Would you agree with
Absolutely, yes.
We hope.
We hope.
And the other piece of this, as Mr. Martin also alluded to, in terms of policy, we do understand that the city has some guidelines in terms of where the cash in the fund balance, as to the balance in the cash should be at the end of each quarter. And that balance and that policy stipulates that in order to provide liquidity adequately to address unexpected revenue reductions or anticipated expenditures, the minimum cash balance in the electric fund should be 10% of the annual revenue net of the fuel adjustment at the end of every quarter. Okay? And we do want to evaluate that against the current balance in the cash fund, and by doing that, we made a note that at the end of the second quarter, December 31st, 2011, that cash balance was actually 29% below the guideline, or $335,730 below that policy guideline. The information to your left there just kind of shows the fiscal year 11-12 budget for the electric fund, the revenue side. We took out the fuel adjustment per the policy. The 10% of that amount is the $1,162,000. This is sort of kind of where you want that cash balance to be at the end of every quarter. Okay, and that kind of shows you at the end of June 30th, 2011, it was pretty much in compliance with that policy, actually $157,000 above the policy guideline. And continue on through the fiscal year, because you're still absorbing that rate increase, we fell below the policy guideline.
if you're looking for something positive out of this, and it took me a while, is the city fortunately did have the policy compliance as late as July of 2011. Had we not been in that position, due to some of these fluctuations and other things, the unknowns, that's exactly why you had it. And if you want to look for the other side of the report, the negative is we didn't identify and address it, and you know, I say we, those in charge, did not address it adequately, in my opinion, at the time to avoid the further decline or sooner. Now, in all fairness, you know, there's been a lot of changes in staffing, and we can just look at the tenure of the director and the finance director and myself, to, you know, not to point fingers, and I'm not dwelling on the past, but obviously it would have been excellent had this been addressed in greater action, but that's hindsight, and I don't know what the prevailing comments were. The director did share with me a report that was generated and presented to council back in 2009. It was a workshop, and then again when this rate increase was developed and discussed during the budget. But the bottom line was the change that was made in September, any way you cut it, was not adequate to handle the pass-through increased cost from VEMA. I mean, that's the real action here, and I don't know any other way to say it except it was inadequate to handle that pass-through cost. And the situation worsened when the second piece of that came in, and then you had whatever actions occurred in terms of collections and fluctuations in use, seasonal and so forth. All that obviously contributed to it to some degree, but without dwelling on that, the bottom line is we did not address adequately the pass-through cost from VEMA. And that's what's put us in this position. And then that's where this cash recovery and policy guideline kicks in. And she has one additional slide, I think, to comment on that. As to where the rubber meets the road, if you will, it falls back on the city manager, and I'll let the director review that.
Yes. The restoration of minimum cash fund balance, this is also part of the cash recovery in terms of the electric fund. Basically what it states here is that should the cash balance fall below the target levels, the city manager is charged with preparing and presenting a plan for restoration to the targeted levels. And if the target level is not met or anticipated that it cannot be met for various reasons, a line item would be included in the fund's expense section to budget a minimum of 2% of the upcoming projected budget revenues until the target levels are met. And that is certainly a challenge, but I believe that is the direction in which the city manager wants to go in terms of trying to improve the cash balance in the electric fund.
And one final comment that I'll make on that at this time, unless there's questions or something generated from the questions, is I take that responsibility, and we'll in the budget presentation that's forthcoming to council, we'll present a plan, likely even before the budget is finalized, on how we will get to that point and what time frame it would likely take. The way I look at it, it took a year to lose them a substantial amount, $1 million out of the cash balance, so it may take as much as a year to get back to it, but the key is that we have a plan and we stick to it, and we do address what is a fair reconciliation of these pass-through costs going in the future, so that we work our way out of this situation and get back in compliance with the city's policy. Again, not expecting it to happen overnight, but hopefully in less or no more than a fiscal year, this can be addressed. That's my goal going into the discussion. I don't know if the director of the Power and Light has anything he wants to add. The only thing challenging that he shared with me is another piece of news looking at the budget, he had projected some additional increase to be necessary. I think that was covered in some of your documentation. But we also are advised that there will be 2 additional actions, and I don't know, Mark, if you have an update on this. One of them, and he can address how this relates to the discussion, the fuel charge is going in the right direction. That's to be reduced. You might want to comment on that, and then we'll talk about one other piece of information.
I had one question for Ms. Rollins.
Well, she'll come back up.
She'll come back, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
The fuel charge as you may be aware, is an annual item that's looked at by our power supplier, and it fluctuates every year. You may have realized 2 increases in 1 year. We had a large decrease a year and a half ago, and then another increase again last year, and all numbers are pointing towards a decrease for our upcoming fiscal year. These figures actually begin in April, which we would see in our May billing. The thing about the fuel charge is it's a direct pass-through. We don't mark up that amount, we don't mark it down. Dominion sends us the bill through VMEA, and we pay it and pass that cost right on to the customer. So, like the manager said, if it's going down, that's a good thing for us as well as the customer.
And the second piece, if you could share, is the expectation is another rate adjustment from VEMA, if you could comment on that for next year.
Along with the fuel adjustment, the power contract that we have with Dominion through VMEA is an annual cost adjustment. Basically what we get on an annual basis, last year being our first year in this power contract. Annually in May, they are supposed to develop projected costs for the upcoming fiscal year, which in our case starts July 1st. Unfortunately, they have the ability to go back and look at all those costs from their prior year, which is called FERC accounting, FERC, F-E-R-C, Federal Energy Regulatory Committee, and they're allowed to adjust their projected rates to us up or down. And right now, the figures that we have as of last Thursday, we will realize an approximate 5% increase to our wholesale costs, excluding the fuel charge.
So with that 22.5% cumulative increase beginning in January of 11, is that my dates right? We will see a 22.5% increase. Now, it's not just us. These increases were applied to all of the member communities.
Yes.
But one thing the director has indicated to me that he has included in his budget proposal is to update our rate analysis, and could you comment on that? And that's the last piece of information I think we've got to share.
Well, as was discussed in 2009, the city had a rate analysis, a rate study completed, which recommended certain things take place. One was a rate increase to be implemented in the spring of 2010, and once these projected costs, let me back up, spring 2010, we were nearing the end of 2010 and the beginning of 2011 when the new power contract would take place. In the spring of 2010, we as VMEA really didn't know exactly what those increases would be to our wholesale costs. So the recommendation from GDS was to do I believe it was like 5.8% that was completed in March of 2010. Hopefully get a better projection of the cost from Dominion by the fall of 2010, and implement another increase. Then hopefully with the beginning of the new fiscal, the FY 12 budget year, which I came in right at the tail end of your budget discussions, would be to do another increase as a true-up to capture the full impact of the new power contract, which Mr. Martin said was 14% beginning January 1st. Then, part of that power contract did allow Dominion to do a minor adjustment to the rates in July of 2011, which was last year, and that amounted to the 3.5%. So then you add that to the 14% plus the 5% that they're projecting for this year, and we've only accomplished a net 7% increase to the wholesale costs. You can see where we're behind. I also think a problem with the cash fund is I think the previous interim finance director and myself were so concerned about paying our bills for the end of last fiscal year. As you may or may not know, June being the end of our fiscal year, people have used the power, and those expenses don't come to the city until July for June. So we got the bill in July, which was $979,000. For the budget of FY11, those figures were backed out and showed up as an expense for FY11. I think both the interim finance director and myself forgot that there was still an implication of that $979,000 to our cash balance. And that's what I'm thinking happened at this point. And we just plain forgot about that, and I've had plenty of discussions with Ms. Rollins over the past 2 weeks about this, and that's the conclusion I'm coming up with. So it was an error on our part, but however, we did request more of a rate increase last year after the beginning of the fiscal year because we weren't able to get all our figures together. But that's put us in the position we are today.
And if I could make one other comment, from my perspective, we've went through it. I think a lot of time can be spent debating what ifs and how and the past, but my focus at this point, unless the council directs me to do otherwise, is to focus on how we get in a better place as soon as reasonably possible, and the processes that we have to go through, and then have a two-pronged approach to this. Get with the collection side of the equation and look at our revenue stream versus billed versus collected, do what we can there, but the main focus be on coming up with a recommendation to this city council that we feel is conservative but adequate to put us in a better place within a reasonable period of time in the next fiscal year. And that's our report, unless you had something else.
That's all I've got, unless any have questions for me.
And any of us will be glad to ask questions, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
May I start?
Go ahead.
I have lists.
Already been through it. I know what it's.
This really caught me off guard, and not what I anticipated at all. I'm with City Manager Martin. How we got here is really of no concern. We are here. Here are just some things that I'm sitting here listening and thinking. I throw them out to see what sticks on the wall. First of all, that this is a major problem, and it is not a major problem for the electric fund. It is a major problem for the city, and I know we have other cash, but I would like to see us start on replenishing that, and to the extent that the general fund and other funds can contribute by deferring whatever expenditure so we don't have to pull more money out of the electric fund over the next 3 or 4 months. That everybody look at their budget. These are not demands, these are just recommendations for you to put into your plan. From me, not from the rest of the council. Y'all can chime in as you see fit. That other departments and see what they can do to help us through this short-term piece where we can get to our new budget cycle. And whatever we can leave in the electric fund only helps us. It doesn't hurt us. We need a stepped-up collection. And I have asked for, and now I'm going to be a little bit more forceful, I need to see what is our collection rate, what is our percentages, how much is past 90 days, and we need to see this. I think for the next 6 months, we probably need to see it every month. I don't know what's involved in generating that report. I have never seen such a report in 4 years, even though we've asked for it. We need to get that analysis so we can see, are we making progress in our collections. If it's a monumental task to get the aged analysis, I could go with every other month or once a quarter, but no further than once a quarter. I would like to have it monthly to see what we're doing and see where our problems are and do what else can we do. We need better reporting for this to slip up on us just to get the cash and just to get, I mean, I looked at the income statement. I didn't go back and look at the last 6 months, but I don't recall having a loss, and so it just didn't register with me to look at my cash dropping off until we got to a crisis. So somehow we need to look at our reporting so that us members of council see this occurring, and staff see it occurring before we get run over by the bus. I don't know if we have to pass on a decrease in the fuel adjustment. That has always been our theory and our goal. But if we're in a crisis here, can we not pass on an increase starting in April, the decrease starting in April, to get us until our new increase comes in July? So again, we can start on this process earlier. If we can't, then, we can't.
Set the rate.
I'm sorry. I guess that's it. Those are just the things that kind of popped up at me right off the top of my head.
I got a question. The money that's collected and passed through accounts and all that, when that's collected, it goes into the general fund, right?
No,
Or it goes to special
stays in
fund?
electric fund.
Stays in electric.
But they can't draw that out unless council approves it, right?
No, they can't spend it unless it's budgeted, appropriated.
It's gotta be
It goes into the cash balance.
Okay.
It would improve our situation.
Oh, yeah.
Any past
Okay.
due.
Gotcha.
Any other questions?
Well, I agree, it's no need to look at crying over spilled milk, it's done now. But as Councilman Burgess stated, this is not an electric fund problem, this is a city problem. And the oversights, they happen, and as he also said, I can echo his sentiments. However, in light of the economic situation across not just this city, but across this nation, and with the unemployment as it is, I would urge, if there is anywhere within the city that we can find monies to help us make up this deficit, to get back in line, that we find them from that resource. I don't even want to consider at this point increasing rates on our citizens again. I know that we didn't increase it enough. From what's said, we should have increased it more before, but I understand the pass-through, but that goes into all the way, takes us back to when we entered this contract. I said that we should have reviewed it from a perspective of a city, because now we can't even look at the option of would it be more beneficial for our citizens to utilize Dominion Power to keep their funds low, keep their bills low. That's not an option because we've entered a 20-year contract that we're only in our first year. But I can say that I would urge, and this is just my opinion, that if we have to do any cuts anywhere in order to make up this deficit, that it not be at the expense of the citizens, because it wasn't really their mistake. it was ours for not bringing it to them with clarity to constitute the pass-through. The rates were increased on us, and I think our citizens can understand. If we told them simple and plain English, well, the ones we buy our electric from just went up on us. So that's going to cause us to have to raise your rates. They might could have understood that. But now that we've gotten so far, our citizens are going to have a fit if we go talking about increasing rates again. We have people who have higher utility bills than some mortgages. So I would urge strongly, I know we don't want to do cuts, and our budget was said to be as lean as it can get. But I can't, in good conscience, vote to raise utility rates on our citizens again, unless it's very, very little where they can't feel it. And we just, if it takes us 2 years to get back in line instead of 1 year, I'd be willing to consider that. But just to get us right back in line and pass it on to the citizens to get there, I can't support that. I think we've got to look at other ways to come up with this money.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I don't think we were talking about increasing the utility rates to play all the catch-up with it. But we do have increases that are going to be coming through from the utilities that we're going to have to address probably in the near future. Did you say another 5%, 10% coming up?
5%, yes, sir. But we're already behind from the first 17 and a
When
half.
we passed at 10%, I thought that was going to be, my understanding anyway at the time, that was going to be enough, plus help to put some money away for infrastructure. And it wasn't, but, I mean, that's water underneath the bridge, but.
We said 10%, but it was actually just.
Well, it was 7 to 8, but.
Yeah,
right,
7% net result.
But I agree, I mean, we need to look at whatever we can do is right now to cut, try to get the funds built up. Work with the city manager if he, help him in the direction going that we need to pull it together as a team.
Well, I think we've got really two problems. We've got a fund balance problem that we have to address, and we have a rate problem that we have to address, because the utilities are just costing us more.
Right.
And we've already subsidized to the citizens for 18 months almost. So we've got to get our rates in line with what it's costing to deliver the services. And then we've got to restore that fund balance by financial agreement. We've got to be at 10%, and we need to get there. So we'll just lean on Mr. Martin. I think Benny's recommendations are good. I made some similar notes and added one more, but I think those are places to start. And we'll just,
So, for clarification, Mr. Martin is going to come back to us prior to budget or at budget time?
It may be incremental. There could be some things that we can do in this fiscal year, and those would need to happen fairly soon to have an impact, to improve our position by fiscal year end when the audit will be completed and so forth. It will certainly look at those, and you made some good suggestions, and we've had some discussion about some possibilities. But in the budget process, we will need to make sure that our projections are good going forward to work our way out of this situation on the longer term. And also taking into consideration the 5% that's expected in July, additional increase, and so forth.
and is this 5% we're talking about, is that going to be it for the next 12-month period, or are we looking at a 5% or something 6 months from that point?
No, that should be it. If it's actually 5%, that would be it until next June.
To the next,
Yeah.
okay.
But we don't want
We
to
can
mislead people. 5% is what's going to come to us
That's
in
our
July. We
wholesale
can't
increase.
we can't just do a 5% increase because we're continuing to go in the hole.
22% in the hole?
We're $500,000 or
I'm not
$300,000
saying
in
we
the
don't need
next
to
4
stop the
months.
bleeding, but I would hate to say, let's go up 20% to make up for the shortfall that we've had, or whatever the number would be, and then all of a sudden we get hit with, 6 months from now, we got another 10% that we didn't know about again.
I understand.
Well, the 22% will just even us out.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
To get to that even out, can I ask, what percentage, and you, both Benny and Barry, are more familiar with numbers, than I am, what percentages of that would be to get us even of our annual budget?
What's the question? Say that again.
What percentage, we need a figure to get even. That figure, what percent of our total budget is that?
Well, the electric fund budget's around 14 million a year, including the...
No, I'm saying the deficit that we're in.
Well, I think
That's-
Mr. Martin is gonna come back with that.
That's what I was going to. Our budget, our revenue budget is about $14 million, and we're almost $1.4 million behind, so it's about 10%, maybe 8% of our annual revenue that we're short
For the electric budget.
for the electric department.
Okay, and I'm saying, so if we're $1.5 million in the hole, that is what percentage of our annual city, because again, we're not talking about the electric as much as this isn't just affecting the electric department, it's affecting the entire city operation. So what percentage is that of our annual or our fiscal operating budget, which has been $22 million?
I don't think you mix those two, because this enterprise fund, it has its own reserve, and it has its own rate structure. That's an entity all in unto itself.
Well, the reason that I'm mixing them together is because for the longest, we have been using that enterprise fund to get funds to the general fund.
Correct.
We've been taking money from that. So now let's look at it for the balancing out purposes of looking at them together, just like we look at it as a revenue source for the city.
Then you'd have to come up with another $1.5 million from a different source.
No, well, what I'm saying is if we have to come up with $1 million, whether it's for the electric department or for the fire department, the point is we're $1 million in the hole, or $1.5 million in the hole, as the city of Franklin, even though it's coming from our electric department.
Well, let's clarify, we're not in the hole. We've reduced our cash position by $1 million.
We've used our reserves. So
$1
we're
million.
talking about
We're not negative, we're just
either.
not as far
$1,300,000 down.
29%.
from
From,
where we were.
but we're not in the hole.
No.
See, because translating this into regular conversation with people, all they understand is, are you going up on my electric or you're not going up on my electric? And if we're talking about we have to go up on your electric, we have to explain to them why we're going up on our electric. And a lot of this is a little over the average citizen's head for understanding.
And I think that's what we want him to do, is to come back with some suggestions of how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
How we can get there.
Bottom line is we need between $800,000 and $900,000 in today's dollars, based on this current projections that they've done, to be compliant with our 10% policy.
To be compliant with our own recommended
Well,
policy.
it's not just ours, we have obligations and to
For the
debt
bondholders, you mean?
debt
The bonding
holders and
company.
everybody.
Bonding company.
And so to be fully in compliant with that, we have to have a plan, and that plan should be to generate enough revenue to ensure, based on known information and best projections, at the end of next fiscal year, we will be back in compliance. Do what we can this year to chip away at it, but within
So
reason.
the bond company wouldn't accept if for once to get us back in line.
Well, we don't know. We haven't
I mean,
approached them.
where I'm going to, if something.
Usually they want a plan for how you're gonna get there if
If
you're out of compliance.
I didn't keep getting interrupted where
I'm sorry.
I'm going at. Not you,
I
not just you,
apologize.
Mr. Martin. Where I'm going at, yeah, go ahead. While we are going, to come up with this money, we need to look at, we are always looking to get money to help the city with from the electric fund. So now maybe the city needs to get us back in even with our compliance, the city needs to help the electric department.
And that's certainly an option, and I understand
And that's
that.
what I'm saying.
That's one
So,
of them we will
and
look
my
at.
original question was, what percentage of our annual budget would be to get us compliant?
And I
And
can't
that's
answer
maybe
that
about
tonight.
5%, 10% of our annual budget? Because this is my understanding from regular survival
Mhm.
and living. If we have to cut our total budget by 5% in order to bring us back in compliance with the required reserves, then I think that's an avenue that we need to consider before we talk about raising rates on our citizens. We need to cut other places so that we can put those funds back into the electric department to bring them in compliance with what we need to have.
The very first item that Mr. Burgess presented was look at deferral of any expenditures by all departments. That was the very first
Correct.
recommendation.
And I believe that's what
It's
Mr.
already on
Martin
the
also
table.
had put out on the table, that we're gonna look at all angles and all developments, and that's to bring it up. That's not the cure. That's not the cure, that's just a stopgap.
Yeah, that may not be sustainable, but we're
Right.
gonna look for whatever we can do now.
I'll have a meeting with you, Mr. Martin, and maybe you can go over it a little more, because
Sure.
on one hand, you say we're not in the hole, and then on the other hand, we're trying to stop the blood from flowing at that rate. Well, you don't need to stop either we are losing money, and we're in the hole, or we're not.
It's clear we're losing money going down in the cash flow to get the cash balance that's there. That's what we have to stopgap. If we continue the path we're going, yes, we're going to be in the red.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say, is if you project forward, the finance director did it through June 30th. And if you project into next year, obviously, at some point, if we do nothing, you would be in the hole. You will be in the hole.
Early next year.
Right. And that's why I said, part of this is a stopgap that we need to do to bring it back, and the other part is the sustainable part, what we're going to do going forward.
Don?
Yeah, I have one question for Ms. Rollins. Ms. Rollins? It'll be a simple one. Look on your summary that you put up there that we have here. Second thing you had here says revenue losses have significant impact to cash balance, which we understand that. All right, you got it on summary? But
Not the timeline,
anyway,
for the first presentation?
Yeah, it's on the back.
Okay.
Right to the last one. Go one back. It should be on that.
Okay.
From factors of impact.
Okay,
revenue.
I'm with you. Mhm.
All right.
Can you put that up on the board?
Sure, I'll have to switch. He's talking about the first presentation.
This is one where we had, you had questions on the last sheet.
One was, it's good.
There you go.
Is that the page, Don?
Yeah, that was it.
That was the page you wanted, Ms. Roll.
There you go. Well, it says, revenue losses have significant impact to cash balance.
Yes, sir.
It says we have $290,000 identified as due to fund from one large account and Irene-related expenses excludes offset due to decline in energy purchase. But this, when Irene came up, the hurricane, I remember that when we did the aid and all helping through the city, that we were gonna pay out a budget and FEMA was gonna reimburse us. Did they ever do that?
That's still the case,
That's what
but
the 40,000 is. It's
Yeah.
unreimbursed money that we're still due.
we will get that eventually.
That's what 40,000 of that is.
Is that what it is?
Yes,
All
that's
right.
the unreimbursed.
We just
Okay.
haven't received it yet, I don't believe, have we,
That's
Ms. Rollins?
correct. No, we have not received
Yeah,
it.
How long does it take to get it?
Usually 6 months to a year.
You have to get all the reports filed.
Is that what interest?
No.
And in
Yeah.
December, the guy...
Pay them.
And in December, the guy told me that our reports were in and filed and needed to be approved. They send them up the line.
They just started that process the beginning of last week, and I was going to share that tomorrow, as a matter of fact. They are just sending a rep, not sending a rep, but a rep has actually contacted us in terms of getting last-minute details from us in terms of that rep approving the final forms to send that payment up to the state. So we're on number one, so we're on our way, and I surely hope that we can have most of that reimbursement by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, that would help us just a little bit towards it.
Well, he complimented Franklin on being the most effectively documented municipality that he's ever dealt with.
That's right. There's a lot of people in
Thank you.
here that deserve praise for that, absolutely.
Is there any process that we can go through to kind of call them and say, we need our money?
You can call them, but it's not going to change.
That usually means they take it from the top of the stack and put it on the bottom of the stack, is what that usually means.
After they put you on hold.
But as long as we get it before June 30th, it'll still be beneficial to us in our plight.
Mr. Burgess had one more question.
One more comment, and this is as much for the city manager's benefit as anything. We've stated that one of our goals is that we are supposed to be at a slight discount on retail to Dominion Resources, and we still need to make sure that we do that. I mean, if we can't sell to our customers at below Dominion Resources, then we don't belong in the business.
Exactly.
So
But we stuck for 20.
Rate increase as well.
I understand that, and that's fine, and they've had their rate increases all along, and I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, and that's.
I believe as of January this year, the State Corporation Commission issues to the legislature comparisons between all the municipalities, the investor-owns and the cooperatives, and I believe the city of Franklin is 12 to 15% under Dominion, and we're about 20, I'll have to look at the sheet, but 25% less than our closest co-op. I can certainly provide that information.
Yeah, we will provide that, because he and I reviewed some historical information on that, and Franklin compares very favorably the cost to some of the other options. The other point on that is, looking ahead, they're anticipating rate increases as well, and so that position shouldn't get any worse. Hopefully it'll get better.
The mayor and I just discussed a letter where Dominion has filed with FERC to do a rate increase.
I just got in the mail last week, this formal notification, but I was afraid that was going to be MIPAM, but you're telling me that's just
it's
going to
just on the retail side.
On the retail side.
And this is kind of one of the benefits of having a municipal, local government-owned utility, is if we needed a rate increase, or even if we needed a rate decrease, this body here decides that. You don't have to go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, you don't have to go to the State Corporation Commission for that approval. Investor-owns and the co-ops, they have to do that. So you're locally controlled.
One other thing that I'll share, before all this discussion came up, awareness was greatly enhanced in the last 2 weeks. The director and I had already discussed looking long-term at this thing, because this is not something that's going to just go away. We are looking at other things that the city could do to better position itself in the long haul to, one, meet customer demand, particularly if we're successful in economic development efforts and job creation efforts that this council's made a high priority, and is certainly a professional priority for me as well, for Franklin. But if we're successful in that, we got to make sure we have adequate supply to meet the demand, and we're at or near the cusp of our current capacity. So what we're looking at, and we won't get into it tonight, we'll just bring it up during the budget discussion in terms of goals. What can we do longer term to fix our that situation, to have the adequate capacity? But how can we do that and afford it? And also, I was informed that it positively impacts on our cost by reducing cost for all of our service that we're currently providing. And again, we won't get into that, but that is a bit of a silver lining looking ahead. We may have to spend money, a capital investment, to work our way into a better place for the long haul, but we can do that hopefully with some of these other changes. So I'll stop with that unless you want to add anything.
No, that's far enough for right now.
Maybe I got a question.
Enough for one day.
I've got a question, and I wish Mr. Councilman Burgess was still in here. He might could add to it. But could somebody up here, or Mr. Bly, put it in language simple enough for a 2-year-old to understand, to our citizens that may be looking, viewing? I don't know about on the north side of town, but I get a lot of comments from citizens saying that they have relatives that have moved to the county and their electric bills are way lower than they were when they were here in Franklin. And I don't know what to tell them. I can't say you're
If I could comment, one thing that's very important is to make sure they're apples to apples. Our utility bill includes water, sewer, solid waste, and electric.
I understand.
And that's a huge difference from
And
most people.
I went itemized with one young lady
Yeah.
who had left the city of Franklin. She's just moved. She's a nurse, commutes to Petersburg or somewhere to a hospital working, and she said that she just bought a house out in the county. And I said, well, I hate to lose any citizens to the county. And she went and she said her utility bills were less. And I said, well, you know, honestly, our electric bill isn't that high, but we have a combined bill that causes it to appear high. And she said, and she started naming utility for utility. And with the and she was saying overall, when you add up everything that they pay, they end up paying a whole lot less than we are. Now, I know we're paying a high trash rate that attributes to our utility bills, but with the exception of the trash rate, she was telling me, according to her bills, they were less living in the county than they are here in the city. And it's hard for me to overcome that to the citizens when, you know, that's the case. So,
well, you asked the question. Would you like to answer the question?
I can only say that I can only speak for electric. And electric, sure, somebody can go out in the county or go elsewhere and say their bills are less. But in order for me to comment on that, I'd have to review as to how many kilowatt hours they're using in the new place, which may have lots of insulation in it, compared to what perhaps they were in the city that didn't have much insulation in it. But it all boils down to not what the bottom line says, how many kilowatt hours they use. That's the only thing I can compare to.
And
the only thing to compare is the rate per kilowatt hour.
Right.
And in Dominion, they have a transmission charge as well as a kilowatt charge.
We have it too, but it's in our wholesale rate.
It's built in.
which causes our per kilowatt hour to be more than...
The rate is higher because it includes transmission.
That's what I'm saying. It
But if
causes
you add
our
the two of
kilowatt
theirs
hour to
together,
be higher.
then-
Yeah. So
Our rates are less than Dominion's rates.
when you take away the transmission fee.
No,
totally.
all of it.
Kilowatt hour to kilowatt hour, our rates are less than Dominion and the co-op.
Well, I can only go back to, and I don't even remember if I was on council, but I picked up the phone and I called Dominion, and I...
Mr. McMorro, he just told you that the state has verified it as well. He just told you that.
I was telling him, I don't know if he heard me tell him that before, but I was talking to him, Mr. Mayor, but you can do that.
But I'll provide you that comparison sheet.
No, what I was sharing with you is I picked up the phone and I called Dominion Power and asked them how much was it for per kilowatt hour for residential service, and they gave me one number. I think it was like 7 cents or something per kilowatt hour. And then I called Franklin and I said, how much do you charge for electric per kilowatt hour for residents? And they gave me something like 11 cents. Now, I thought that difference, after talking to the mayor, I thought that difference was because of the transmission fee that caused ours to be a higher number than what I was quoted by Dominion Power. But
No.
you saying it's different.
If you can go to Dominion's website and go to rates, you can look at the residential rate for comparison, but you have to remember that you have to add their fuel charge rider to it. You have to add, I think the residential rates right now have 4 different riders that you have to add to that rate to get the true cost per kilowatt hour to compare to City of Franklin's cost per kilowatt hour.
And that's what I think the original, his predecessor explained to you at the time that you made that up.
Well, again, I mean, all I know is what the people know, and I'm just, the reason I asked the question is because I deal with these, I talk to these people, and I hear their cry and their complaint, and I would love to be able to tell them, as I've told them, in my opinion, people have a myth in Franklin that they charge more on the south side than they do on the north side, and I have had to defend that that's not the case. I said, The houses over there are newer, they have better insulation, they have more appliances. So I defend that we charge everyone the same thing, but that nevertheless does not console these people when they are saying, well, when I moved out there, it's less. So I was hoping that perhaps you could, give me something to tell these people.
Is what he suggested to you adequate?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you could repeat what he said, and that ought to address this.
Mr. Mayor, it wasn't on the agenda, and due to the lateness of the hour, on the next agenda, could we have boards and commissions on? Then I'll have about 3 or 4 by that time to talk about. I've only got one.
I appreciate that. If there are no urgencies for boards and commissions
I've
tonight.
got one where we met the other night, and then I'll have 2 more this week.
Okay, if, with everyone's consensus, we'll defer that till the next meeting, and I'll call for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion is a second. All in favor?
Wait.
We got one appointment we need to do in closed session.
Need to.
Yes.
Okay, then.
Yeah, I was talking about reporting on boards and commissions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was not on the
Is
agenda.
there-
Yeah, we were actually just gonna do that once a month, but we can do it
Okay.
whichever way you wanna do it, and that was at the next meeting.
But we do have one appointment.
But we do have one appointment.
Okay, well, then, I was trying to avoid doing that.
And it's a fairly quick one.
That was my
That
hope.
we can't defer.
That was what I was thinking we didn't have as appointments, so I apologize very much.
That's okay.
All right, may I have a motion to go into closed session?
I move that the Franklin City Council meet in closed session to consider appointments to boards and commissions as permitted by Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A1.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Hello.
I said aye.
And
Don't be reluctant.
I think it was
Oh, was it? Huh? I thought it was you, that's why I said I was waiting on you.